Under the blinding camera flashes, Jiang Lan was beautiful as a goddess, while the young man holding her was nothing more than a backdrop. His name was Gu Kai, and with every click of the shutter, the composure he struggled so hard to maintain seemed ready to collapse at any moment. What the world saw was an intimate photo between a rising star and a senior actress, a senior doting on her junior. But what he felt was the searing closeness of someone he could never truly have. He closed his eyes and drowned himself in that moment, the corner of his lips lifting slightly like a silent prayer. After the shoot, Jiang Lan introduced him to the director, proudly calling him her younger brother and asking everyone to look after him. Everyone on set secretly praised her for being gentle and considerate toward a junior. But to Gu Kai, her words felt like a cage. She ruffled his hair and told him to endure a little longer. All he could do was softly say thank you and bury his true feelings deep in his heart. He took off his glasses, and the world before him instantly blurred, leaving only one thought screaming madly in his mind. He did not want to be her little brother anymore. Later, he watched her being interviewed on a screen, and her words once again echoed through his private hell. She told the whole world that, in her eyes, all young male actors were like little brothers. It was her professional shield, but to him, it felt like a personal rejection. This pain was already painfully familiar to him. It had lasted a full 8 years. After returning home, she called out from the bathroom for him to bring her a towel, and that overly natural familiarity tormented him again. He froze where he stood. Remembering how absent-minded she always was, he could only sigh and go get it. Through the fogged-up glass, she even joked that asking a man to hand over a towel was a dangerous thing. But in the very next second, she completely denied his identity as a man, reminding him that she still remembered when he was just a snot-nosed brat of 12. As he handed the towel over, their fingers brushed lightly. That tiny, insignificant touch was like a spark, instantly igniting the desperate and greedy longing inside him. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor, crushed by one heavy question. Was he really nothing more than a younger brother in her eyes? The chance to get an answer came during another shoot. Jiang Lan was supposed to partner with an actor named Peter. Gu Kai stood to the side watching coldly, his face dark. Staff members whispered that Peter was holding her too closely and his hands were getting a little too bold. Jiang Lan was always professional, and she endured it from beginning to end until the director finally called cut and told them to change into the next set of outfits. But at that exact moment, the new costume was ruined by spilled coffee. The staff immediately panicked. Jiang Lan suggested changing the shot to a back view to salvage the scene as much as possible. Seizing the chance, Gu Kai stepped out of the shadows and said he had a similar suit. Quiet and certain, he pulled up his hood, ready to take everything he wanted. He entered the shooting area and seamlessly replaced the other actor. Jiang Lan turned her head and asked in surprise where the coffee she wanted had gone. He bent close, his lips nearly brushing her ear, and said in a low voice that he had already finished it. He apologized softly, but it was not the coffee he was apologizing for. It was for what he was about to say next. He confessed that he truly could not endure it anymore, because the scent on her was too intoxicating, and the reason he had always wanted to become an actor was only so he could be a little closer to her. In young Gu Kai's eyes, the world had once been cold and lonely. The endless rain seemed to soak through his entire being. At his parents' funeral, black umbrellas spread into a sea, while he stood there like a sorrowful island, ignored and pushed aside by relatives. In their eyes, he was nothing but a burden. Tears kept sliding down his face, silently proving his despair. Just as his small world was about to collapse, an umbrella appeared above his head, shielding him from the wind and rain. A calm and resolute voice told him that since his family did not care about him, then from this day on, a silver-haired girl, Jiang Lan, would take care of him. Looking into his tear-blurred eyes, she solemnly declared that from today forward, he was her little brother. That promise became a new sun in his dark life. Years later, Gu Kai woke from that intense memory, his emotions still vivid. He found Jiang Lan asleep on the sofa from exhaustion, scripts and snacks piled around her. All he could do was sigh helplessly and say she was pushing herself too hard again. When he picked up a blanket to cover her, she turned in her sleep, and her robe fell slightly open, revealing the delicate lingerie underneath. The sight made his heart jump and reminded him with painful clarity that his feelings for her had long strayed beyond any so-called sibling affection. She mumbled about grilled fish in her sleep. He let out a soft sigh, then gently gathered her into his arms. As he carried her back to her room, he realized that his desire to protect her had long since become far more complicated, and that change was finally fixed in place by the light kiss he pressed to her forehead. The bond between them had been forged by shared trauma. Jiang Lan's own childhood had also been a battlefield, her parents' bitter divorce, and the cruel neglect she suffered after her father remarried and built a new family. Her father's tragic death only completed the hard shell she had built around herself. Now Jiang Lan was a famous 28-year-old actress, while Gu Kai was a 20-year-old idol at the height of his popularity. Beneath the carefully crafted image he showed the world lay a darker, fiercer possessiveness. After a jewelry brand launch event ended successfully, Jiang Lan stretched lazily, tired but satisfied. Then she suddenly realized she had left the company's priceless necklace in the dressing room. She told Gu Kai to wait in the car while she walked back alone down the empty corridor. But before she could get close, she heard two actresses who envied her viciously spreading rumors, saying she had slept her way to the top. A cold fury instantly rose in her heart. She kicked the door open with a bang, startling the two women into immediate silence. They stammered out denials, but Jiang Lan ignored them completely and simply walked to the vanity, putting on the incomparably gorgeous necklace. When she turned around, her beauty and presence alone were the strongest possible rebuttal to their ugly faces. One of them was still muttering curses under her breath when Jiang Lan suddenly struck, slamming her palm hard against the mirror beside the woman's terrified face. She showed a smile, so cold it sent chills down the spine, then raised her phone and told them she had recorded everything just now and would be more than happy to send the video to their boss. After scaring the two women rigid, she turned and headed for the underground parking lot. There, she discovered Gu Kai waiting outside the corridor. He only said calmly that he had followed her. His sharp gaze noticed the small cut on her hand, so he gently took it and wrapped it with a handkerchief. Then, in a tone so serious it was almost alarming, he told her that if she ever really lost control and hurt someone, he would handle all the consequences for her. That dark, possessive promise hung there between them. Jiang Lan asked the Gu Kai beside her what he thought of the outfit she was holding, but he coolly commented that it was just another sporty set fit for a 15-year-old student. She did not mind at all, merely saying that as long as he picked it, it would look good. Then her attention was suddenly drawn to his height, and she exclaimed that he had grown taller again, which even seemed to surprise him. Jokingly, she stuffed a huge pile of clothes into his arms and insisted that he try them all on one by one, a confident smile curling on her lips. But just as she was leading him away, two customers recognized her as the big star Jiang Lan and immediately began secretly taking pictures, hoping to score a major scoop. The moment she realized she had been recognized, she grabbed Gu Kai and ran off at once, shoving him halfway through changing into a nearby fitting room. She hurriedly explained that the outside was full of fans. Gu Kai understood at once. If a top actress was photographed barefaced, it would cause an uproar. The fans gradually drew closer, guessing that she might have hidden in the second fitting room, and kept calling her name from outside. Inside the fitting room, Gu Kai asked in a low voice what exactly was going on, but she suddenly stumbled and fell straight into his arms. He caught her at once, holding her firmly against him, and warned in a low voice not to move because they had almost been discovered. In that cramped space, the two of them pressed tightly together, motionless in tense silence. Finally, she softly asked whether it was safe outside, but he told her that they still were not alone. At the same time, elsewhere, two paparazzi were complaining that Jiang Lan was incredibly hard to photograph. They had followed her for 2 full weeks and gotten nothing, because her younger brother was always by her side. One of them leaned in mysteriously and said he had heard a rumor that the two of them were not blood-related at all, so their relationship was probably far more complicated than it appeared on the surface. Just then, they captured the most valuable photo so far. Jiang Lan and Gu Kai in an intimate posture, looking as though they were embracing. Greedy smiles spread across the photographers' faces. a famous actress and a newly rising idol. This was the perfect combination to ignite a massive scandal. But their smug delight was quickly interrupted by a sharp knock on the car window. The one who came was Gukai. He had pulled his cap low to hide his face, but his whole body radiated a dangerous pressure. Coldly, he told them it interfered with a private schedule and demanded that they delete the photos. The photographers hurriedly lied that they were only passing by, while urging their companion to drive away quickly. Gukai merely narrowed his eyes slightly. The next second, he smashed a fist against the car door, yanked it open, and snatched away the camera. Coldly, he warned the rookie photographer to learn his place, then tore out the memory card right in front of him. The other man sneered and asked whether he was not afraid of the whole world discovering the disgraceful relationship between him and his so-called sister. Gukai tossed the ruined camera back. Gukai's expression instantly became terrifying. He said they could come at him however they wanted, but if they dared photograph his sister again, they had better be prepared in advance to bear the consequences. He suddenly stepped forward, grabbed the man by the collar, and promised in a low voice that he had plenty of time and plenty of ways to play with them slowly. After shoving the man hard back into the car, Gukai turned and left, his determination growing firmer. He told himself that he would not remain only Jiang Lan's younger brother forever. When the day finally came for their true relationship to be made public, he would have nothing left to fear. Later, when he was alone in his room, Gukai looked at their photo together, then set a picture of Jiang Lan smiling as his phone's lock screen. He did not need to care what anyone else thought, because he had only one wish: to win her heart. He swore that no person and no thing would be able to stop him. In a modern office of severe, cold lines, a man named Gu Chung was flipping through a magazine featuring Jiang Lan. An assistant reported to him on the situation of Gu Chen's stepson, the boy named Gu Kai. She explained that although the child had been born from an affair, in terms of bloodline, he really was Gu Cheng's grandson. Hearing this, the powerful president, Gu Chung, let out a cold laugh, thinking of how his useless younger brother had always wanted to escape their father's control. He thought coldly about what sort of person this son had grown into. He had long since decided that if the boy turned out just like his father, then he did not deserve the surname Gu at all. With a hard expression, he stood up and announced his decision. He was going back to the country to meet this child in person. News that Gu Chung, the one in power at the Gu Group, was about to return to the country spread quickly, and it made the impending clash between him and the nephew he had never met seem ready to erupt at any moment. On a whim, Jiang Lan decided to go to Japan for a hot spring trip, but when they reached the hotel room door, she stopped. Gukai stared at the single guest room left, and the composure on his face finally cracked, while she explained that they had no other choice. She casually pulled out a row of bedding to use as a divider, as if that fragile barrier could really block the growing ambiguity between them. Gukai felt he was on the verge of breaking down, realizing that tonight would be the ultimate test of his self-control. But before he could even protest, the lights went out, and darkness swallowed the whole room. They lay down with only a little distance between them. But for Gukai, sleep was impossibly far away. He turned onto his side, only to find Jiang Lan's sleeping face mere inches from his own. Her peaceful expression stood in sharp contrast to the turmoil raging inside him. In her sleep, she shifted and brushed against him. He jerked backward, trying to put some distance between them, but she unconsciously followed closer. Gukai instantly became more awake than ever, his mind racing as he desperately suppressed his feelings. He even raised a hand to cover his face, urgently trying to regain control. The next morning, he woke to find the room completely empty, and his heart sank abruptly. A staff member cheerfully told him that Jiang Lan had gone to the mixed-gender hot spring. Those words hit him like a blow. Rage immediately exploded inside him. He rushed toward the hot spring, his mind full of images of other men seeing her. But when he arrived, the scene before him was nothing like what he had imagined. Jiang Lan was simply soaking leisurely in the hot spring with a group of harmless elderly women. And the moment those grandmothers saw him, they enthusiastically tried to introduce their daughters to him. When he saw an elderly man gesturing toward the empty space beside her, the resolve in Gukai's heart only grew stronger. He stepped into the mist-shrouded spring water, determined to stay by her side no matter what. Jiang Lan was a little surprised, but happy. In that quiet, intimate atmosphere, she suddenly felt somewhat shy and softly remarked that he looked much more mature now. As snow began to fall, she reached out and caught a snowflake, watching it melt in her palm. Thoughtfully, she said that even though people know beautiful things vanish the moment they are touched, human greed still makes them impossible to resist. Locking eyes with him, she openly admitted that she, too, was a greedy person. Before he could even react to what she meant, she had already leaned down and kissed him. In that moment, the whole world seemed to stop, leaving only Jiang Lan's flustered, blushing face and the blazing fire completely ignited within Gu Kai. He had never known that melting snow could burn so fiercely. That dreamlike journey finally came to an end, and the road back was filled with suffocating silence. The kiss replayed over and over in Gu Kai's mind, while at the same time, he uneasily realized that she had not said a single word to him since then and had even changed to another room. He regretted letting his feelings show, and he could not help wondering whether she was angry. In the underground parking lot, he reached out to help with her luggage, but she snatched it away at once and coldly insisted that he call her big sister. That form of address stabbed in his heart like a dagger, but he could only force himself to agree. In the elevator, Jiang Lan kept psyching herself up, telling herself that no matter what, she was his sister, and there could never be any other kind of relationship between them. But the instant the elevator doors slid open, her resolve shattered completely. A masked man lunged at her with a knife, screaming that he was going to ruin her face. Gu Kai rushed out almost at the same moment and threw himself directly in front of her. The blade sank into his back with a sickening dull sound. Jiang Lan let out a horrified scream, tears instantly spilling from her eyes. Gu Kai violently shoved the attacker away, his gaze locked tightly onto Jiang Lan's panic-stricken face. A cold fury swallowed him whole. Someone had actually dared to hurt her. That was absolutely unforgivable. Ignoring her frantic cries, he chased after the man. At that moment, a sleek black car suddenly appeared, and the man in the back seat, addressed as President Gu, calmly ordered the driver to help the attacker escape. The car sped away. Gu Kai stood frozen in place, shocked rigid after recognizing the person who had arranged the man's escape. Jiang Lan hurried to his side, her voice trembling as she told him not to chase after him, saying she had truly been terrified just now. Later, when she treated his wounds, she flatly refused to go to the hospital, afraid it would cause a public scandal. As she scolded him for being an idiot, tears still slipped down her face, blaming him for using his own face to shield hers without a second thought. Gu Kai lightly touched her cheek, his voice gentle yet firm, and said that protecting her beautiful face was his responsibility. Fireworks bloomed outside the window, and an indescribable emotion gradually filled the air. Looking into her eyes, he said that his injuries were because of her, and admitted that he could no longer suppress the feelings in his heart. She told him to say it again, but he only pulled her tightly into his arms, silently wondering when she would finally understand what it was that truly filled his heart. Standing amid the noise of the lavish banquet, Jiang Lan held a glass of red wine, her eyes hiding countless thoughts. Her thoughts drifted back to the boy she cherished so deeply. Her manager pulled her out of her memories and urged her to go greet the distinguished guests, saying that the only reason she had come today was because Gu Kai was sick. But as she approached, her gaze fixed on a man whose face felt strangely familiar to her, the new president of the Gu Group. He was introduced as Gu Cheng, a man who had long heard of her reputation, and the pressure in his gaze made her pause slightly. She quickly suppressed her emotions and explained her lapse as a momentary distraction. Their wine glasses clinked lightly, and he calmly said he was a fan of her acting, but she found that compliment hard to believe. She kept feeling that there was a strange resemblance between this man and Gu Kai, but she forcibly pushed the thought aside, treating it as a ridiculous illusion. Yet soon, a shocking piece of news completely threw her world into chaos. The company spokesperson announced that her rival, Tong Meng, had officially been appointed the new VVL brand ambassador for Asia. Before she even had time to react, Gu Chung was already standing at her side, inviting her to dance and dangling an even greater temptation. If she was interested, he could even give her a global ambassador position. Alarm bells instantly rang in her mind, and suspicion rose at once. She knew the filthy dealings of the entertainment industry all too well and could not help wondering whether Gu Chung had personally manipulated the entire affair. With impeccable professionalism, she declined his invitation to dance, saying she could not dance, and politely offered a few compliments about Tong Ming. Then she confidently said that VVL would not be disappointed by their choice. But beneath her calm exterior, flames were already beginning to burn. She swore that whatever she wanted, she would win back with her own ability. After thanking him, she turned and left, leaving Gu Chung standing where he was, watching her retreating figure with calculating eyes. His companion confirmed that the person who had taken Gu Kai back was indeed Jiang Lan, and that they were now living together. A cold smile curved Gu Cheng's lips as he casually thought that he had never expected his target to go this far for a woman. Such a weakness was exactly like his father's. He told his companion there was no need to stop her from leaving, declaring that this was only the beginning. But her brief escape soon ended, because outside the venue a crowd of reporters quickly surrounded her, their questions stabbing at her like knives. How did she feel about Tong Ming snatching the VVL partnership from her? Amid the chaos, a luxury car stopped by the roadside, and Gu Chung told her to get in. Her manager, overjoyed by this sudden turn of events, hurriedly pushed her into the car. Sitting beside the mysterious president, Gu Chung, Jiang Lan felt deeply uneasy. His sudden appearance looked, no matter how one saw it, like a deliberate arrangement. While looking down at his laptop, he offered to drive her home, which made her wonder what his real purpose was. When they arrived downstairs at her residence, she thanked him and was about to leave when he called her back. He casually remarked that VVL style was too arrogant and did not suit her. Other brands, on the contrary, would be a better match for her confident and striking personality. Then he bluntly asked whether she would be willing to have a meal with him and talk. At that moment, her entire impression of him changed. In that instant, she realized that this man was far more complicated than she had imagined. So she turned the situation around and insisted on treating him to dinner herself as thanks for helping her. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment not far away, Gu Kai stared at his phone, his heart heavy with worry. He typed out a message asking when she would be back, then irritably deleted it. As his concern gradually turned into anger, he typed another line asking whether she remembered there was a patient at home waiting for her, but deleted that as well. He tried to soothe his restlessness, telling himself that she was only busy with work. His fingers hovered over the screen for a long time, and in the end he finally typed out an almost humble request, asking whether she wanted to come home and saying he could pick her up. At the same time, Jiang Lan was having dinner face-to-face with Gu Chung. He noticed that, unlike those stars who treated eating as a crime, she was different. Looking down at the food on her plate, she answered calmly, yet firmly, "Eating properly is not a crime. Laziness is." Under the restaurant's soft lighting, the famous actress Jiang Lan sat opposite the cool and shrewd Gu Chung, the faint smile at the corner of his lips seeming to hide countless thoughts. Gu Chung remarked that she ate quite a lot, saying she was unlike other stars who treated food like some savage beast. Jiang Lan coolly shot back that the real sin was laziness. Only when people had eaten their fill did they have the strength to deal with all the endless gossip in life. She frankly admitted that she really was fighting for the VVL ambassador position, and that she knew her public clash with her rival had become exactly the kind of spectacle the public loved most to watch. Gu Chung also confirmed this cruel reality. The public happened to crave precisely that sort of thing. She sighed at the suffocating nature of fame. Every step she took had to be scrutinized, and true freedom seemed to exist only in dreams. Gu Chung recognized that line as being from a film, and for one brief moment, a bit of resonance arose between them. Just as they raised their glasses, a message from Gu Kai suddenly popped up, asking whether she wanted him to come pick her up. Gu Chung was explaining to her what kind of flawless image a VVL ambassador needed, but Jiang Lan had already drifted off in thought. She quickly replied to Gu Kai, telling him to come pick her up, as if eager to draw a line in her life, and just as eager to push forward the stagnant relationship between them. At home, when Gu-kai saw her message, he froze completely. She had been avoiding him all this time, and this sudden request made his heart race instantly as he rushed out the door. But when he arrived, his hopes shattered in an instant. The person who had brought her back was someone else, and not just anyone, but his own uncle, Gu Chung. He hid in the shadows and watched, jealousy burning in his eyes. Jiang Lan asked Gu Chung to keep their meeting secret, and the sight of them standing side by side twisted his heart like a knife. Back in the apartment, Jiang Lan saw the table covered with all her favorite dishes, prepared with all of Gu Kai's heartfelt care. But at that moment, everything felt more like a cage. Just as she tried to retreat to her room, he slammed the door shut and trapped her there. His voice was low and dangerous as he demanded to know who she had just been with and what exactly she was hiding from him. Jiang Lan refused to yield, insisting that she had the right to have a life of her own and asking what right he had to interfere in her actions. But Gu Kai's anger finally exploded completely. What really bothered him had never been the dinner itself, but why it had to be that person. He pinned her against the door, his heart pounding hard against her chest. Yet she coldly reminded him that unless he was speaking as her younger brother, he had no right to interfere at all. Gu Kai grabbed her hand, his voice lowered almost to the point of despair, and asked what if that was not the role he wanted. At last, the words that had hung between them for years were spoken aloud. They were not related by blood. As if burned, Jiang Lan jerked her hand back and told him that some things were not matters to joke about lightly, then slammed the bedroom door shut. Outside the door, Gu Kai clenched his fists and swore that this would never end like this. A few minutes later, her manager called with astonishing news. She had landed the VVL contract, and the most direct reason was that someone had seen her with President Gu. Jiang Lan was baffled. Gu Chung had clearly shown no attitude at all when speaking with her, yet the advertising script had been strangely altered to include an intimate scene. Her manager reminded her to be extremely careful, but Jiang Lan was still caught in the emotional storm between herself and Gu Kai, and simply accepted it in silence. Both of them knew perfectly well that a line had already been crossed, and there was no going back. This tension made Gu Chung recall a distant memory. A little boy, young Gu Kai, was secretly peeking into a hospital room from outside the door. A younger and friendlier Gu Chung comforted him, saying that he had been born to be his older brother. With a gentle smile, he lied and said that he was not sick, nor was he hurt. But the memory soon faded, returning to reality, leaving only Gu Chung standing alone before a grave in the rain. The word liar echoed through the desolate silence. Gu Chung thought of how that big star had tried to use him, deliberately making Gu Kai misunderstand the relationship between them. But he had not expected that she would really make use of him, and the way she stubbornly refused to bow her head only made her more interesting to him. He thought that since she was unwilling for anything to happen between herself and Gu Kai, things actually became simpler. So he gave a meaningful smile and decided to give them a push. At the commercial shoot, Jiang Lan was fully ready, with her makeup and styling complete. The director and staff looked at her in amazement, praising her beauty as fairy-like and saying she was simply the perfect choice for the role. The director explained that the commercial was inspired by the Greek myth of Hylas and the water nymph, a story about a beautiful youth encountering a water nymph in the forest. Jiang Lan was playing the water nymph who was seduced by Hylas and ultimately fell madly in love with him. This was completely different from the script she usually took on, and the full tagline for this perfume was "Born for Love." Just then, a staff member announced that President Gu had arrived, and Gu Chung strode onto the set. Jiang Lan formally thanked him for giving her this opportunity, but he only brushed it off lightly, saying that he had even specially chosen an actor for Hylas. As if to ease her tension, the door was pushed open and a young man wearing a stylish baseball cap and sunglasses walked in, complaining about how he had suddenly been called over to film a commercial. Then he removed his hat and revealed his face. Jiang Lan's eyes widened in shock, and she softly called his name, Gu Kai. Gu Kai was equally stunned and asked whether the person he was supposed to film with was actually her. Gu Chung explained that since Gu Kai was signed under the company, having him partner with her was the best choice. Jiang Lan immediately objected, her voice taut with tension, reminding Gu Chung that Gu Kai was her younger brother. But Gu Chung coldly questioned her professionalism, asking whether she doubted her own acting skills, and stated that truly outstanding actors never chose whom they acted opposite. He framed it as a purely business decision, saying it was best to keep the benefits within the family. Backed into a corner, Gu Kai gritted his teeth and agreed. He said he had no problem with it. As filming officially began, Gu Cheng's assistant quietly asked whether doing this really counted as helping them, since she knew very well how Gu Kai felt about Jiang Lan. Gu Cheng merely smiled faintly and calmly, said that he also wanted to see whether they could get what they wanted, so they only needed to wait and watch. The scene was set in a mythical jungle where a narcissistic flower bloomed, bewitching everyone who saw it, just like the water nymph herself. Hylas appeared, and from the first moment he saw her, he was determined to possess her, using his charm to seduce her until she willingly left her homeland for him. Jiang Lan simply could not enter the role. When she looked at Gu Kai, there was not the slightest trace of love in her eyes. The director immediately called cut and pointed out that her expression was completely wrong. The director reminded her that Gu Kai was not her younger brother right now, but Hylas, the man seducing her, so her gaze had to be full of love. To encourage her, the director also praised Gu Kai's performance as excellent, even personally demonstrating the kind of alluring touch the role required. Watching all of this, Jiang Lan realized that Gu Kai had already thrown his whole heart into the performance, and a surge of determination rose within her as well. She told herself that this was her job, that she was a professional actress, and then asked the director to give her one more chance. The camera rolled again, and this time Jiang Lan completely sank into that dreamlike illusion. When her fingertips gently brushed across his face, she felt her own heartbeat quicken too, thinking that even if the words he spoke were only lies from the script, she would still feel happy. The director called cut and excitedly announced that the take was flawless. But Gu Cheng, watching from the side, was not satisfied. Coldly, he said that he still could not feel the fatal seduction this perfume was supposed to have, and even directly questioned her acting. Jiang Lan's body stiffened slightly, and she suspected he was taking revenge for what had happened before. He warned her that if she could not do it properly, then she should not waste everyone's time. The director reacted quickly and immediately proposed a change to make the commercial more impactful. The final scene should include a kiss. The president asked Jiang Lan whether, considering her relationship with Gu Kai, she could do it. With her professional pride driven to the front lines, she could only assure him that she could. A sentence Gu Kai had once said flashed through her mind, that protecting a flower was like protecting her. She suddenly realized that Gu Kai was no longer just her younger brother. He was also an extraordinarily gifted actor. She had to take this seriously and finish the scene, even if it felt like a kind of sacrifice. But the moment their lips were about to meet, countless contradictions surged through her heart. It was what she wanted, yet she was also afraid that from then on, things between them would only become even more awkward. Yet at the very last second, Gu Kai pulled back and softly said sorry. He could not do it. What he was apologizing for was not the scene, but the fact that he had fallen in love with her. He chose to protect her rather than let this water nymph sacrifice herself for love. It was precisely this genuine love that truly awakened the soul of the perfume, proving that only true love could make a person willing to sacrifice. The director was overjoyed and declared the scene absolutely perfect, even more powerful than a simple kiss. Jiang Lan turned to look at Gu Cheng, a hint of provocation in her eyes, but he said nothing. Thinking back on that moment, Jiang Lan finally understood that Gu Kai had pulled away not because he could not act, but because he cared about her feelings. In the cold, empty corridor, Gu Kai stopped his brother and demanded to know why Gu Cheng had returned to the country. Why had he appeared before him again? Gu Cheng lit a cigarette and calmly said that their father had told him he had a younger brother, a very clever brother who was also a lot like him. Gu Kai pressed him about his real purpose, and a flash of cold light crossed Gu Cheng's eyes as he stated bluntly that he had come to take him back to the Gu family. Gu Kai let out a scornful laugh and reminded him that for more than 20 years that family had despised him and ignored him. Gu Cheng exhaled a stream of smoke, his voice low and dangerous. He said that he belonged to himself and that he intended to take back everything that should have belonged to Gu Zheng. His final icy words echoed through the empty corridor, including you. Gu Kai's gaze turned hard as well, and he decided to seize back everything connected to Gu Zheng too, including Jiang Lan herself. He sat at his desk as though a silent storm were brewing. Jiang Lan walked into his room, intending to thank him for the commercial shoot, but he cut off her polite words on the spot. In a frighteningly cold voice, he asked her when exactly he had started liking her, then added that it no longer mattered, because he had no intention of stopping. Jiang Lan's answer shattered his composure in an instant. She told him that she would always think of him as her own younger brother. Those were exactly the words he least wanted to hear, and in that moment, something inside him snapped completely. He slammed his laptop shut, grabbed the suitcase he had already packed, and announced that he was leaving. He explained that it was precisely because of her rejection that he could no longer stay. He could not continue living under the same roof with her in the awkward role of a younger brother. His voice was heavy with deep sorrow. To be honest, meeting her had been both the luckiest and the unluckiest thing in his life. Fate had arranged everything wrong in timing and wrong in the relationship between them. He admitted that he had once resented fate, resented being born too late, and resented walking into her world at that particular moment. He said that if he stayed, she would only ever see him as a child, so he had to leave. In the end, as if making one desperate gamble, he suddenly pulled her tightly into his arms and whispered a promise in her ear. When they met again next time, everything would begin anew. After saying that, he turned and left, leaving behind one final request: stop treating him like a younger brother. She stood alone in the silent room, numbly thinking that perhaps putting some distance between them really was the best choice. Maybe, she thought, she hoped he would slowly forget about her. But in the next second, her eyes fell on his cold medicine, and her worry instantly shattered all her resolve. She rushed out of the room, anxiously calling his name, but the only thing she saw was the taillights of that black sedan vanishing at the end of the road. All she could do was stand there in disappointment, silently praying that he would remember to take his medicine and stop making her worry. Many years later, the boy she had once known was gone, replaced by a cold and domineering man. Gu Kai stood on the set, the gun in his hand raised steadily, not a trace of emotion in his eyes. With chilling precision, he acted out a violent scene, firing shot after shot at the human-shaped targets in front of him. At the very end, he pressed the muzzle against the forehead of the last target, his expression utterly unreadable. The director called cut and loudly praised his astonishing acting skills. Afterward, his manager brought up the heated discussion about him and Jiang Lan and asked whether he was sure he did not want to appear on that variety show. Gu Kai replied blandly that unless Jiang Lan agreed, he would not go. At that moment, someone reminded him that Jiang Lan would be coming to the set that afternoon for a guest role. The role was cruelly similar to their reality. She would play a cold-hearted woman who had once helped the male lead, only to die by his hand after he was consumed by hatred. Of course, Gu Kai heard the irony in that. He had entered this industry only to be a little closer to her, yet now he felt farther from her than ever, as if trapped beyond a boundary he could never cross. Just then, his phone vibrated. The call was from Gu Cheng. The voice on the other end was blunt, saying that all the help he had given him before had apparently been wasted, since Gu Kai had already moved out of Jiang Lan's house. Gu Kai's patience was nearly exhausted, but Gu Cheng finally revealed his real purpose. He had returned to the country to investigate the cause of Gu Kai's father's death. He dropped a shocking revelation, claiming that Gu Kai's father had not died of illness. Then he told the stunned Gu Kai that if he wanted to know the truth, he should come to the company. Gu Kai offered no further explanation and only told the director that he had an urgent matter to attend to. Then he rushed out of the set, completely ignoring his manager, shouting behind him that Jiang Lan was about to arrive. He started the motorcycle engine and sped away, catching only a fleeting glimpse of the newly arrived Jiang Lan through the chaotic crowd and reporters before vanishing into traffic. Meanwhile, in an immaculate office, Gu Cheng learned that Gu Kai was on his way. The assistant could not help asking whether telling the truth to someone so young was too cruel. But Gu Cheng remained firm, saying that since he was a member of the Gu family, he had to be able to bear it. A dark memory flashed through his mind, a dim boardroom. He coldly admitted that when he had learned the truth back then, he had only been 16. Then the story flashed back again to a simpler, happier time. 24-year-old Jiang Lan had just finished an audition and collapsed onto the sofa in exhaustion. 16-year-old Gu Kai found her there. Only then did she suddenly remember that she had forgotten to prepare a Christmas gift for him, but he merely smiled and reminded her that there was still 10 minutes until midnight. Then he handed her a gift, clearly having waited a long time for her to come back. When she opened it, she found an oddly shaped pillow hat inside. He explained that this way, no matter where she was filming, she could always sleep comfortably whenever she wanted. He even put the ridiculous thing on her himself and solemnly declared that it suited her perfectly. She was so embarrassed she wanted the ground to swallow her up, but when she saw his disappointed expression, she could not help feeling guilty, so she swore that she would definitely give him an even more embarrassing gift in return. But he cut her off, saying that did not matter at all. Then he pulled her over for a photo and softly said that her walking into his life was the best gift he had ever received. That photo captured the purest happiness and later became the most heartbreaking memory from before everything turned complicated. Thick smoke filled the air as Gu Kai listened to a ghost from the past. It was a recording his mother had left behind before her death, like a final message from the other side of the grave, breaking the silence and exposing a terrifying truth. The Gu family had caused the death of his father, Gu Xing. The news struck him like a brutal blow, shaking the foundations of his entire world. Several miles away, in the studio, the famous actress Jiang Lan was already displeased by Gu Kai's sudden disappearance. Yet she still covered for him with professional composure. But in the end, her patience finally ran out, and she called him directly, demanding to know what exactly he was doing. But instead of an excuse, his answer was a fragile plea. He wanted her to come find him. His voice was very soft as he admitted that he missed her terribly. She found him on a desolate rooftop with empty beer cans scattered across the ground. Just as she was about to snatch the alcohol from his hand, he suddenly grabbed her and pulled her into an almost desperate, tight embrace. He insisted that he was completely sober and begged her not to leave, saying it was enough just to let him hold her like this. His father's words kept echoing in his mind. The Gu family were a pack of money-grubbing beasts who had stood by and watched his adoptive father die. Immersed in grief, he asked Jiang Lan why, after his parents' funeral, when everyone said he was an ill-omened jinx, she had been the one to take him home. She comforted him gently, saying she knew it was not true, and told him that she too had lost her father in an accident. But that recording revealed even more than that. To make sure the inheritance fell into their hands, the Gu family had even wanted to get rid of him, the stepson, to eliminate the last threat. The memory of that car crash he had narrowly survived. A flood of pain drowned his senses. He looked at her, torment filling his eyes, and asked what she would do if one day she discovered that he really was the disaster everyone said he was. Jiang Lan did not answer. She only gently cupped his face. Her touch was silent comfort. She told him that no matter what happened, he would always be her little Kai. Her words pierced through his despair, making tears rise in his eyes. He held her tightly again and confessed that he liked her very much. He made her promise that no matter what happened, she had to believe him and must never leave him. Once he got her promise, his grief hardened into icy resolve. He would make those people pay for everything they had done to them. The scene shifted to a luxurious banquet. Gu Kai and Jiang Lan danced gracefully across the floor, like a painting brought to life. But Gu Kai's mind was full of revenge, and he suddenly began pressing Jiang Lan on why she had come to the banquet. When the music entered the partner-switching portion, he was forced to separate from her. In the end, Jiang Lan ended up dancing with Tong Meng, who immediately asked what exactly the relationship between her and Gu Kai was. Elsewhere, the arrogant Gu Wang's son was complaining about his engagement, looking down on his fiancée, while also coveting the power the marriage alliance would bring him. Then his eyes landed on Tong Meng. Thinking his chance had come, he walked over and began harassing her in a lewd and frivolous manner. He aggressively pressured her to drink with him. The moment she refused, his fake politeness turned into threats. He grabbed her wrist and squeezed harder and harder, even calling her a bitch. Just as he was about to force the drink in her mouth, Jiang Lan calmly stepped forward and told him to let Tong Meng go. Gu Wenxuan was first stunned for a moment by Jiang Lan's beauty, then proposed a condition. She could drink the glass in Tong Meng's place. Jiang Lan took the glass, but only told him that he was not worthy. Then she shoved him aside and left with the shocked Tong Meng, helping her escape. Humiliated and enraged, Gu Wenxuan became even more obsessively fixated. But before he could do anything else, Tong Ming suddenly snatched the glass away and stubbornly drank it all in one gulp. The act made her so uncomfortable she could barely stand, but the meaning of her defiance could not have been clearer. Gu Kai, who had been watching from the shadows, asked the person beside him to confirm that everything was proceeding according to plan. He had long known Gu Wangsuan's weakness for Tong Ming. The woman he could never have would lead him to do something stupid on the night of his own engagement and destroy his own future with his own hands. To Gu Kai, this was only the first step in tearing apart the rotten Gu family, and also the beginning of avenging his father. The plan went exceptionally smoothly. Tong Ming, pushed to her limit, slapped Gu Wang's son hard across the face, and publicly called him trash, shocking all the guests present. A memory flashed back to gentler, more innocent years. After finishing an audition, 24-year-old Jiang Lan returned home exhausted and found 16-year-old Gu Kai waiting for her all through Christmas Eve, having even specially prepared a gift for her. When she opened it, inside was an unbelievably ugly sleeping cap. He explained that it was for her to wear when napping on set. She was so stunned by its ugliness that she nearly fainted. Seeing the disappointment on his face, she felt a wave of guilt for having actually forgotten Christmas, and secretly swore that she would take revenge with an even uglier gift. But he only gently took her phone and told her that being able to spend Christmas together was already enough. Then he snapped a selfie, forever freezing that innocent, carefree happiness in time. On New Year's Day, Gu Kai knelt in the Great Buddha Hall and silently made a wish, then drew a fortune stick. It was the best possible fortune. He said he had already fulfilled a vow on his mother's behalf, but Jiang Lan, who had come with him, immediately became interested in the fortune drawing too. She wanted to try her luck and asked the Bodhisattva how her career would fare in the coming year. The first fortune she drew was a middling one. Unhappy, she said her hand had slipped. She tried again, and this time drew the worst possible fortune. She still blamed her clumsy hands. Gu Kai softly scolded her for cheating and told her to be serious. Only by calming her mind and praying silently would the fortune be accurate. She closed her eyes and prayed devoutly. But the moment another worst possible fortune fell out, Gu Kai quickly caught it and secretly switched it with his own best possible fortune. Jiang Lan noticed nothing and was overjoyed, believing that everything that year would go exactly as she wished, completely unaware of the sacrifice he had made for her. As they left, Gu Kai silently made a wish in his heart, hoping that all of his good luck could be given to her, only wishing that they might grow one step closer. The image shattered abruptly, returning to that lavish banquet, where the drunken Tong Ming was publicly cursing a man as trash. She declared that from now on, every time she saw him, she would slap him once and then tell him to get lost. Just then, a swarm of reporters rushed in. Camera flashes burst wildly. Tong Ming laughed and told them to get a good shot of the true face of this Mr. Gu. Jiang Lan hurriedly grabbed her friend, trying to calm the situation. But that Mr. Gu flew into a rage and turned the accusation around, saying the women had schemed to frame him. Immediately afterward, he lunged at Jiang Lan and, in the chaos, tore her evening gown. But before he could touch her, Gu Kai, radiating icy fury, was already standing in front of her, sending him flying with a single punch. Another man quickly took over the situation, telling Gu Kai to leave it to him, while he picked up the already unconscious Tong Ming. The entire venue instantly descended into chaos, while only one thought filled Jiang Lan's mind. How had things spiraled completely out of control so fast? Amid the turmoil, she stumbled into a flower pot and nearly fell, but Gu Kai immediately came to her side and caught her. As he led her through the crowd, Jiang Lan felt as if the whole world had vanished, leaving only the frantic beating of her heart in her chest. She felt a deep sense of safety, knowing that as long as he was there, he would never let her be hurt. The two of them arrived at the relatively quiet underground parking garage. But just as Gu Kai was about to go start the car, Jiang Lan stopped him. Urgency in her voice, she asked whether they could go back together and have a proper talk. The brief calm was soon broken again by the same reporters from before. They were even thanking some Mr. Gouda, praising him for arranging such sensational news. They even asked whether Jiang Lan's face should be blurred in the photos. Gukai instantly realized that everything tonight had been a trap from the very beginning, and Jiang Lan begged him to get in the car and come home with her. The silence in the car was so oppressive it was suffocating, until Gukai suddenly hit the brakes and told her in a low, intense voice not to treat him like a younger brother anymore. He said bluntly that if he went back with her, it would no longer be as her younger brother, and he left the choice to her. The two of them arrived at his spotless apartment. He admitted that housekeeping had always been what he was best at, then handed her a change of clothes. After changing, Jiang Lan relaxed a little and asked whether he should explain what exactly had happened tonight. Gukai pulled up a news alert on his phone and told her that the entire affair had been orchestrated by his uncle, Gu Cheng, whose goal was to use Tong Meng to destroy Gu Wenxuan's family and force them into bankruptcy. Jiang Lan was stunned, and the moment Gukai thought of that monstrous family, whose eyes held nothing but money and who even wanted to push him completely out of the game, his expression darkened. But he quickly brushed over it lightly. He did not want her to know his true identity, much less see the filthy ugliness hidden inside his family. Jiang Lan kept pressing for answers, but then suddenly noticed the injury on his hand. Gukai seized the opportunity and pretended to feel dizzy in order to avoid her questions. She immediately grew nervous and insisted on finding medicine for him, which instead made him panic a little, because he had always been the one in charge of the medicine. After returning to her home, and having already decided to see the act through, he swallowed the medicine she handed him. An hour later, he fell asleep, but she realized that his condition seemed to be getting worse and worse. He softly said he was fine, but when she bent down to check on him, he grabbed her wrist and asked whether she could hold him for a while. In a low voice, he said he was scared and asked whether she would find him bothersome. His head grew dizzier and dizzier, and in the end he pulled her into his arms and completely passed out. Jiang Lan froze, unable to stop herself from wondering whether the medicine had caused some strange side effect. But when she tried to get up, he clung to her tightly and begged her not to leave. Helpless, she could only lie down beside him, gently stroking his hair and letting the two of them quietly nestle together as they had before, even if only for one night. Early the next morning, Gukai jolted awake, his first reaction sheer panic. He thought Jiang Lan had already left, but she was right beside him and had even prepared breakfast for him. A wave of relieved warmth instantly flooded his heart. She teased him and asked whether he felt any better, while he hurriedly said he was fine and firmly refused to take any more medicine. Then she tried to continue last night's conversation, but he pretended to have forgotten and asked instead whether he had done anything strange the previous night. Jiang Lan blushed at once and immediately denied it, then hurriedly fled the room. But she could not hide the smile at the corner of her lips and finally admitted that the fact that he was willing to stay had made her this happy. Watching her departing figure, Gukai's heart gradually grew firm as well. He knew that he no longer wanted to let her go. Gukai suddenly sat bolt upright in bed, his chest heaving violently from the nightmare. He dreamed of Jiang Lan's wedding. He dreamed of her saying, "I do," to another man, and just as the two of them lowered their heads to kiss, he woke up in terror. The horrifying image still clung to him. Just then his phone chimed. August 9th, Jiang Lan's birthday. An almost desperate thought surged into his mind, and before he knew it, he had already walked into a jewelry store. The sales clerk recommended a lock-shaped necklace, saying it could keep an important person by your side forever. Holding the necklace, he couldn't help wondering whether something so simple could really keep Jiang Lan with him. But when her image surfaced in his mind, his thoughts gradually cleared. In the past, he had fantasized about keeping her by his side through possession, hiding her away so no one else could see her. But he knew that wasn't love. So in the end, he chose a key, a symbol of her freedom. He placed the key around her neck, while he wore the lock on his own wrist. It was a promise that he would always place himself in her hands. A car sped through the city, but inside, the atmosphere was all business. Gukai, actress Tong Meng, and their manager were listening to interview strategy. The two of them were now the hottest on-screen couple around, and the manager insisted they keep reinforcing that image, publicly claiming that each was the other's ideal type. But Gukai coldly rejected the idea on the spot, saying it would be difficult because he already had someone he liked. The manager exploded immediately, warning him not to let his feelings affect his rapidly rising career. A curious Tong Ming pressed him to ask who the person was. Gu Kai's gaze softened, and he frankly admitted that the person he liked was his idol, a star. His thoughts drifted back to the moment she entered his life. She had been like a beam of light shining into his dark world. Back then, he had been like a lost soul until he saw Jiang Lan on television, that dazzling girl who had won the Pegasus Award for Best Actress at only 18. Her brilliance was so blinding that it stirred an almost stubborn desire in him to catch up to her and get closer to her. So he seized every opportunity, even signing up as a volunteer just to appear in the same place as her. And in the end, he even secured a role in her stage play. He had once stood for hours under the blazing sun, yet he always felt that if she could do it, then he could too. Everything he did was only for the sake of one day, appearing in the same frame as her. His thoughts returned to the present. Tong Ming smiled and said that shining people really were worth pursuing and that she would fully support him. But just as the car began to slow down, it suddenly stopped. The car in front was Jiang Lan's. At the same time, a message from her popped up on Gu Kai's phone, and their manager received an anxious call. The actor who was supposed to accompany Jiang Lan on the red carpet had canceled at the last minute. Tong Ming cried out in surprise, finally realizing that Jiang Lan was now stuck in the awkward situation of having no partner. While the manager hurriedly searched for a replacement, Jiang Lan sent Gu Kai another message, saying there was no more suitable choice now. Tong Ming suggested that she and Gu Kai go over together, which would make the perfect senior-junior pairing. But Gu Kai clearly had other plans. His gaze darkened, and he suddenly pulled open the car door. He said directly that he had come here with Jiang Lan in the first place. The manager tried to stop him, scolding this newcomer for trying to ride the movie queen's fame to climb higher. But Gu Kai stood firm and only said coldly that no one was more suitable than him. He even thanked Tong Ming for reminding him that good things ought to be kept at home. Then he stepped out of the car, walked into the storm of blinding flashes, took Jiang Lan's hand, and led her onto the red carpet. The media instantly erupted, recognizing that movie queen Jiang Lan was walking side by side with the explosively popular actor Gu Kai. As they posed for photos, thoughts churned in his mind. She was his adoptive older sister, the person who had raised him, and the one who had brought him into the world of fame and fortune. And he had long since sworn that he would always stand by her side, until the day they could finally be together forever. In the car, Tong Ming stared at the scene in disbelief. Gu Kai's words kept echoing in her mind, and at last a terrible realization surfaced. She and Gu Kai liked the same person. So all this time, she had been cheering on her own romantic rival. In this twisted play, she was the clown. But her manager saw an excellent opportunity in it. Just then, another car arrived, carrying President Gu, the boss of their company. He shivered for no apparent reason, as if the air had suddenly turned cold. Meanwhile, Jiang Lan sat alone in her apartment. She had already moved out of Gu Kai's home. Her assistant messaged to ask whether she wanted spicy diced chicken bought for her, but she ignored it. She thought of Gu Kai standing in the kitchen, proudly serving her that one-of-a-kind healthy version of spicy diced chicken he had made especially for her. She took one bite of the takeout and felt only disappointment. It tasted nothing like the one he made. As she scrolled through their chat history, the grayed-out dates on the calendar seemed to silently remind her of the ever-lengthening silence between them. Later, in the dressing room, she heard a stylist complain about her younger boyfriend, saying that once the novelty wore off, he stopped putting in the effort. Those words hit her hard, making Jiang Lan unable to stop wondering whether a young man's affection really could only last 3 months. During the filming of a variety show, a romance compatibility test unexpectedly typed her as the domineering CEO type, sending the audience into a frenzy. Jiang Lan answered gracefully that instead of getting rich through a man, she would rather become rich herself. But when the host brought up the option of a younger puppy-like boyfriend, she froze instantly. The other guests began discussing the difficulties of that kind of relationship, saying that the younger party might feel inferior. Jiang Lan agreed as well. Maintaining an imbalanced relationship really was exhausting. The topic had clearly unsettled her. After recording ended, she sat in the car, and the silence of her phone became almost unbearable. But the next second, Gu Kai's messages suddenly flooded in like a tide. He said he had finally finished the grueling shoot and at last had a day off, and asked what she was doing. Before she could reply, her phone rang. It was him. He said he had called because he was afraid she hadn't seen his messages, and he admitted frankly that he missed the feeling of receiving messages from her. The only thing he wanted was to hear her voice. Learning that he rarely had a day off, she asked where he was, thinking that this meeting would only matter if he wanted to see her just as much as she wanted to see him. A faint smile rose to her lips. Jiang Lan hurried to the address. She was still wondering about the guest house decor when the door was suddenly yanked open and party poppers exploded everywhere. It turned out to be a surprise party, and for some reason, she had become the completely unprepared special guest at Gu Kai's birthday celebration. She was immediately surrounded by his friends, who warmly welcomed the goddess in their hearts, Sister Jiang Lan. Only then did she learn that Gu Kai had originally just asked his friends to book a place for him. He had never expected the entire production crew to show up and join the fun. Jiang Lan could only put on a polite, professional smile and thank everyone for taking care of her younger brother, a role she had long since mastered. But Gu Kai saw through her at a glance. He grabbed her wrist, his expression darkening, and told her to stop acting. He reminded her that she was only his sister in front of outsiders, warning her not to keep that kind of distance from him. The tense atmosphere was interrupted by the suggestion of cooking. A staff member named Zhao Yun volunteered to do it, but Gu Kai clearly had other plans. Leaning close to Jiang Lan's ear, he said softly that he wanted to eat something she made, and added that if he could eat something made by her own hands on his birthday, it would be the greatest blessing. Cornered, flustered, and with nowhere to retreat, she could only agree and decided to make a cake. She even stubbornly claimed that she had learned it while filming and that making a cake was nothing more than beating eggs and mixing flour. But reality quickly shattered her confidence. Holding a spoon, she was so clumsy she couldn't even separate the egg yolks properly. Failure after failure made her more and more irritated. Just as she was about to lose her temper, Zhao Yun casually walked over and demonstrated a simple way to separate the eggs. Jiang Lan froze for a moment, then watched Zhao Yun skillfully prepare several dishes that Gu Kai loved to eat, carefully explaining how she had studied his tastes. Seeing how at ease the other woman was in the kitchen, an indescribable emotion suddenly surged in Jiang Lan's heart. She began stirring the batter viciously, her pent-up anger almost turning into visible black smoke. At some point, Gu Kai had appeared behind her and softly asked whether she had some grudge against the flour. Before she could snap back at him, he covered her hand with his and guided her movements. In a low voice, he taught her not to stir in circles, but to fold inward from both sides so bubbles wouldn't form. Jiang Lan's whole body stiffened instantly, finally realizing just how close he was to her. Her heartbeat pounded painfully, and at some unknown moment, Zhao Yun had tactfully disappeared. Gu Kai merely smiled and softly said that he was only teaching her how to make a cake. But in that small, quiet space, all Jiang Lan could hear was his breathing against her ear and the warmth radiating from his palm, as if it were about to scorch her skin. The feeling was so intense that she could barely breathe. Just then, Zhao Yun returned, instantly shattering the overly intimate atmosphere and rescuing Jiang Lan from a state that was nearly suffocating. Jiang Lan felt as if a great weight had been lifted. She hurriedly shoved the cake into the oven and firmly refused Gu Kai's offer to help decorate it. She desperately needed a little space of her own right now. In the end, the finished product came out crooked and a complete mess, but everyone still kindly praised it. Gu Kai immediately announced that the person who made the cake had to take the first bite, then held a forkful up to her lips. To her surprise, actually tasted pretty good. He leaned down close to her, his voice low and husky as he murmured in her ear that it really was delicious and very, very sweet. His nearness, along with the layered double meanings in his words, made a blush spread all the way from her face to her neck. As she cut cake for the others, she could feel him watching her with an all-knowing gaze, as if certain he had more than enough patience to wait for whatever would happen next. Elsewhere, in a sleek and stylish office, the man called President Yu was listening as his assistant nervously reported that the artist Tong Meng had cleared her entire schedule before Christmas in order to prepare a special gift for the company Christmas party. At this moment, Tong Meng had only one task: to find the gift her idol Jiang Lan had sent out. She cheated just a little, coaxing a description of the gift out of Jiang Lan's assistant. Green wrapping, gold ribbon. So she quickly locked onto the target hanging high on the Christmas tree. Proudly, she took down the prize and hugged it tightly to her chest, as if her childhood dream of Christmas had finally come true. But when she opened the gift, her joy instantly turned into utter confusion, because inside was an expensive bottle of whiskey. Just then, President Gu appeared coldly and told her it was his gift, a limited edition that hadn't even been released on the market yet. Then he brought up the gift she had put so much effort into preparing. Tong Meng was instantly mortified and lunged to snatch it back, but he easily lifted it out of her reach and opened it on the spot. Inside was a fan-made photo box. He even began reading aloud her sincere, yet unbearably embarrassing fan letter in public, making her want to vanish on the spot. When he got to the line where she called Jiang Lan the brightest star in the universe, she tried to stop him, but he caught her wrist and asked whether she thought it was shameful. Completely defeated, she could only ask for her things back. But he gave a mocking laugh and dismissed all the heartfelt effort she had poured into it as flashy garbage, a complete waste of time. He bluntly told her that he had signed her because he valued her artistic worth, not her fangirl brain, and until she proved herself worthy, he would keep the box in safekeeping for her. His cutting words struck her like thunder, forging her humiliation into a cold determination. The incident also became a nightmare that came back to torment her again and again, but it only made her more resolute. To get the gift back, Tong Meng threw herself into work with unprecedented ferocity, and the passion and professionalism she rekindled made the entire team see her in a new light. This new momentum reached its peak at a board meeting. President Gu was in the middle of giving a report when the phone projected onto the main screen was suddenly flooded by Tong Meng's messages, one after another, all notifying him that she had successfully completed her work and demanding the return of her personal property. Several executives awkwardly looked away, while President Gu calmly turned off the projection and continued the meeting without changing expression. A few days later, Tong Meng was so anxious in the dressing room that she was nearly in tears. Just when his silence was tormenting her to no end, the company delivered a package. Inside was the photo box she had finally recovered after losing it, and attached to it was a small card, a reward for the hard-working little one. Merry Christmas. The frustration she had suppressed for so long was finally swept away by a genuine smile. Later, President Gu lowered his head to look at his phone and found that Tong Meng had sent him a photo. In it, she was holding up a gingerbread man with the caption, "Time to say Happy New Year now." At last, the corners of his mouth lifted into the faintest smile, and he sent her back a brief message. Meanwhile, backstage at the Spring Festival Gala, the final 5 minutes were vanishing in chaos. But for Jiang Lan, the world seemed to slow down and drift far away. The stylist was giving her hair one last touch-up, while she simply stared blankly at herself in the mirror. Her assistant sighed and said that Jiang Lan had not gone home for New Year's Eve dinner in 3 whole years. Jiang Lan gave no response. All of her attention remained fixed on her phone screen, where a young man named Gu Kai was performing at another gala. The sight instantly stirred a wave of nostalgia, and her thoughts drifted back to simpler times. Back then, before he had debuted, the two of them would hurriedly share a plate of dumplings backstage. Now he had become a rising new star on a local network program, living in another world far removed from hers. With a heavy heart, she sent him a New Year's greeting, feeling only that the distance between them was growing wider and wider. But when she stepped onto the stage, her professional smile still concealed her loneliness as she calmly greeted the audience. The countdown began, and midnight fireworks burst into bloom. She wished everyone a happy new year, but the words sounded hollow and pale. After the performance ended, the staff were thanking her when a voice cut through the night. It was Gu Kai, out of breath but smiling. He was holding a gift box and asked whether he had come too late. Jiang Lan froze, completely bewildered. Hadn't she thought he was supposed to be at another studio? Gu Kai broke into a grin and explained that the moment his performance ended, he rushed over immediately because he knew that once she got busy, she would definitely forget to eat. He opened the box, revealing dumplings that had already gone cold. She asked whether he would regret missing his own station's New Year's Eve dinner for this, but but he shook his head and insisted that New Year's Eve was meant to be spent with family. As fireworks lit up the night sky, he solemnly promised that next year, the year after, and every year after that, they would spend this day together. Later, Jiang Lan was about to throw away that hideously made cake, but Gukai stopped her and insisted on keeping it, because she had made it for him with her own hands. At the thought of the earlier scene where he had smilingly licked the cream off her earlobe, her face instantly flushed all the way to the base of her neck, and that mortifying moment replayed over and over in her mind. She immediately flew into embarrassed anger, scolding him that he was not allowed to throw away birthday gifts other people had given him, nor act so intimate with her in front of his coworkers. But instead, he stepped even closer and lowered his voice to ask whether what really bothered her was actually that he had been standing too close. The teasing, flirtatious air vanished in an instant as he raised his hand to grip her arm, and his expression turned serious. He told her to stop running from the truth. He had seen the look on her face when she was making that cake. He knew she had feelings for him, and he was long tired of her pretending she only saw him as a little brother. Jiang Lan's expression instantly turned cold, as if covered in a layer of ice. She dismissed his confession as childish probing, nothing more than a trick she had seen too many times before. She reminded him that he was still just a newcomer. If rumors ever got out that he was involved with his older sister, not only would his career be ruined, but his fan base would collapse with it. But he grabbed her hand, his voice thick with barely restrained emotion, and confessed that the reason he had become an actor in the first place was for her. And for her, he could quit at any time. But she still pulled her hand back, firm and leaving no room for compromise. She told him that she supported his career, but she too had devoted her entire life to her own. Acting meant everything to her. As a public figure, she could not do whatever she pleased. The partner she chose in the future had to be someone both her fans and the industry could accept, not someone who would drag them both down. At those words, his face darkened at once. She asked if he was truly certain that he could give up everything for her and never regret it. But fire rose in his eyes as he shot back. If he could become a star on her level, or even surpass her, would she give him a chance? Then Jiang Lan changed the subject and mentioned that a friend had complained about her turning down all their scenes together. Right after that, she took out a script, an S-tier espionage film starring her, and the producer believed one of its roles suited him perfectly. She looked at him steadily and told him that reaching her level would not be easy, but this was an opportunity he absolutely could not miss. Only by climbing upward step by step could he truly stand beside her. At the same time, at the read-through for the new project, producer Sun Hao was explaining that this film was their top priority. When Gukai learned that he had once again been assigned to play her younger brother, his heart sank. He could not help interrupting to ask who would be playing the male lead. Lai Changjian, the producer, replied, saying the role was still vacant because most suitable actors could not fit it into their schedules. Gukai seized a chance and boldly said he wanted to compete for the part. The producer let out a cold laugh, treating him as just another young actor who did not know his place. He began describing how complicated the role was. A thoroughly unlikable orphan who later became a spy and secretly fell in love with a heroine he could never have. This clearly was not a role a rookie could handle with ease. But in the next second, Gukai's entire aura changed abruptly. He planted one foot on the edge of the table, his gaze cold and dangerous, and asked the producer if he did not believe him. Another director beside them sneered and asked why they should believe an orphan, a pickpocket, a fraud. Without even pausing, Gukai fired back, because I'm all of those things and they're exactly how I survived. The whole room fell silent instantly. What he had just said was a line from the script spoken by Lai Changjian himself, and it stunned everyone speechless. A flash of excitement crossed Jiang Lan's eyes. She could tell that at this moment, Gukai was almost the character himself. Taking advantage of the moment, she suggested that since the role had not been cast yet, they might as well let him do a test scene. She also reminded everyone that sometimes the compatibility between an actor and a role was something impossible to explain. Though reluctant, the producer agreed to give him one chance for Jiang Lan's sake. Gukai began to prepare. The director called action, while the producer leaned back in his chair with interest, wanting to see just how much real skill this arrogant kid had. It was a performance that seemed to bleed, so real it was almost chilling. The director had clearly already called cut, but for Gukai, the scene was far from over. Su Kaming, played by Jiang Lan, had just crushed him with her own hands. Her words echoed through the silence of the set. He was nothing but a useful tool, a blade that never should have grown feelings. She coldly declared that she no longer needed him, and that abandonment was like the final and cruelest blow. Despair and fury surged up violently. Gukai slammed her hard against the wall, madness blazing in his eyes after betrayal, and hoarsely roared that he was not her dog. Yet her expression never changed, like a mask of utter indifference. When she turned and walked into the light, leaving him alone in the shadows, that despair beyond the script finally crushed him completely. He slowly slid down to the floor, the performance draining away to reveal the real heartbreak beneath. Tears ran down his face, and he utterly broke down. The director and producer both burst into applause, praising the scene again and again as absolutely brilliant. Jiang Lan, meanwhile, walked toward the actor curled up on the ground as if shattered. She gently placed a hand on his shoulder and softly told him to take a moment, saying that his intensely powerful performance had stunned everyone. But all he could do was murmur one heavy truth. It was not acting. Holding her hand, his voice trembling, he pleaded that if one day she really grew tired of him, she should not push him away. He promised he would leave on his own. At that moment, the ice in her eyes finally melted just a little. Calling him silly little brother, she soothed him softly and said how could she ever not want him. But that small victory did not last long. The producer called him over and formally announced that the role of the male lead, Lai Cheng-jian, was his. But just as Gukai was thanking him, the director started worrying about who should play Su Qilin. A meaningful smile curved on Jiang Lan's lips as she said she already had the most suitable person in mind to play her younger brother. She took out her phone and showed them a photo. It was a handsome silver-haired boy, Zian. Gukai's world spun at once. So in the end, she still had someone else. Meanwhile, on the other side of the studio, another actress, Tong Meng, was also struggling through her own scenes until her eyes ached with exhaustion. She decided to take a break and casually scrolled through her phone, only for her eyes to light up the moment she saw news that Jiang Lan was filming nearby too. Her fatigue vanished without a trace. Excitedly praising that beautiful older sister in a cheap Pao, she hurried off at once to visit her idol on set. At the same time, filming officially began on Gukai's side as well. An actor who had previously competed with him for the role congratulated him on the surface and even handed him a red envelope. But every word carried a barb, reminding him that the role was a double-edged sword. It could either make him famous overnight or destroy him completely. And just then, Tong Meng came bursting and full of energy, grinning as she asked for a red envelope too. After getting one, she skipped over to Jiang Lan and happily announced that she had come to visit the set. Jiang Lan politely excused herself by saying she needed to speak with the director, leaving Tong Meng standing there with a blissful expression. But her happiness was quickly shattered because the co-star opposite her, Gukai, wickedly informed her that he was actually the male lead and would be playing Jiang Lan's on-screen lover. Tong Meng froze on the spot, then looked despairingly at her own far less dazzling partner by comparison. And when Zian arrived, things became even more complicated. He brought homemade cookies to thank Jiang Lan for recommending him. Watching from aside, Gukai was instantly flooded with jealousy. He strode over, snatched a cookie from Jiang Lan's hand, and said he was starving. Then he introduced himself to Zian, his tone thick with possessiveness and warning as he told him not to waste Jiang Lan's time. Zian remained calm, as ever, merely pointing out that Gukai was jealous before extending his hand for a handshake. Gukai vented all his pent-up frustration into his acting. In the next scene, he subdued an armed criminal with a brutally efficient coldness that was almost cruel. He nailed it in one take, to the director's delight. As Gukai wiped the fake blood from his face, he could clearly feel his acting growing sharper and sharper. But that satisfaction quickly vanished when he saw Jiang Lan speaking with Zian in low, intimate tones. The longer he watched, the angrier he became, realizing that Zian was obviously deliberately imitating her style, clinging to her like sticky candy. That closeness had long crossed the line of what ordinary siblings should have. And when he saw that in an online poll for Jiang Lan's best on-screen partner, Zian was actually leading by a narrow margin, his suspicions were completely confirmed. Gukai cursed inwardly, but outwardly walked over without showing a trace, smoothly interrupting their line rehearsal. He leaned his head directly onto Jiang Lan's shoulder and said he wanted some acting guidance too. The atmosphere tightened instantly, and Zian immediately adopted the attitude of a senior, his words edged with thorns as he lectured him. After Zian was called away, Gukai quietly reminded Jiang Lan to be careful of that man's schemes. She turned to look at him, a mysterious smile at her lips, and suddenly asked whether he liked the normal her better. The meaning-laden question jolted his heart violently. That was practically the same as telling him she had no interest in puppy-like men. And in that instant, he knew he had won. She leaned a little closer and softly reminded him that right now, he was her lover. But immediately after, when she asked whether he still minded this younger brother identity, he froze instead. She explained that he had gone too deep into the role just now, and even she had unconsciously begun looking at him from her character's perspective. A wave of guilt immediately surged through him. After she was called back to set, he watched her departing figure and finally realized that his earlier intense pleading had really just been a moment of losing control. The character's emotions had spilled over into his own heart. Thinking of that, he awkwardly covered his mouth, sincerely hoping the camera had not been rolling at the time. Meanwhile, Zian was smugly scrolling through his phone, enjoying the online praise for his and Jiang Lan's attentive younger brother image. His manager's voice interrupted his self-satisfaction, asking whether he had been getting too close to that actress. Zian waved a hand carelessly and said he was merely cooperating with the production team's intentions, creating a more eye-catching rich older sister and younger brother screen dynamic. His manager reminded him how dangerous rumors were for an idol, but he merely smiled, his eyes full of cold calculation. He scoffed at the idea that he would really pursue Jiang Lan, openly admitting that this was all just for hyping up an on-screen pairing and riding her popularity along the way. Looking at her photo, he also remarked thoughtfully that the attachment in her eyes was not for him at all, but for someone else, and that, on the contrary, made it strangely interesting to him. Then he obediently accepted the script his manager handed him, putting on the perfect image of a serious actor, though his mind had already wandered elsewhere. Meanwhile, in another room, Gukai's assistant was furious over Zian's blatant, opportunistic marketing tactics. But Jiang Lan did not care in the slightest, calmly saying that she knew he was simply borrowing her popularity. Gukai asked whether she really intended to just let that man siphon away her traffic. She calmly advised him not to be so rude to a colleague, then coolly added that she was hardly some disposable item to be thrown away after use. Raising a hand, she gently ruffled his hair and compared herself to the sun. If someone borrowed a little of its light, it would not grow dim. She told him not to worry, because she had always been able to see clearly who was truly good to her. Soon, the call to return to set pulled them back into another world, a world filled with blood and despair. At this moment, Jiang Lan had already become the elegant Su Yanming. In an alley, she found Lai Changjian, played by Gu Kai, battered black and blue, and curled up in a corner. Without hesitation, she tore a strip from the hem of her exquisite dress to bandage his wounds, her voice steady. She told him that if he wanted to live, he should come with her. Weakly, he asked why she was saving him, his eyes full of wariness and suspicion. She answered calmly that his abilities were useful to her. A broken laugh escaped his lips as he gave his name, Changzai, meaning one who brings disaster. This curse had clung to him from the day he was born. It had killed his parents, and it had killed his brothers too. He slammed his bloodied fist into the ground and howled in despair, asking why someone like him should go on living at all. But Su Yanming's expression did not change in the slightest. She merely guided him to lift his head and look toward the horizon, pointing out the morning star, the brightest light before dawn. She said that he too could become such a star, someone who guided the lost through darkness. Then she held out her hand to him. That scene instantly stirred another memory. Another woman had once extended her hand to him in exactly the same way. By the time he was pulled back to reality, this brief tenderness had already sealed his fate. Later, alone and wrapped head to toe in bandages, he clutched the strip torn from her dress tightly in his hand like a sacred relic and fell hopelessly in love with her. Back on the real set, the makeup artists were whispering that something about Gu Kai's recent acting state was off, as if the role's gloomy and suffering soul had truly attached itself to him. When Jiang Lan approached, he was still immersed in the script, quietly admitting that he felt uneasy about the farewell scene they were about to shoot. Then he went off alone to rehearse, his mind like a battlefield with countless thoughts tearing at each other. The script's lines kept tormenting him, her character's cold words, saying she had always seen him only as a tool, a blade without feelings. He could clearly feel her overwhelming presence on set. Her acting was too strong, almost completely suppressing his own performance and controlling every one of his reactions. This role was devouring him. His longing for her had completely fused with the character he was playing, burning into a fire he could no longer control. In that instant of madness, he grabbed her and kissed her with all of Li Changjiang's fury, roaring that he was not her dog. That forbidden possessiveness screamed wildly through his mind. Not only was the director not angry, he shouted for them to hold the pose, praising the raw and intense emotional tension. Afterward, Jiang Lan stood before the mirror examining the small wound on her neck. Gu Kai apologized to her, but she did not mind at all, treating it only as dedication to art, and even praised his improvisation. He gently placed an adhesive bandage over the mark he had left, silently admitting to himself that she could slip into a role with effortless ease, while he had to squeeze himself dry to the limit just to barely keep up with her. He remembered that when he was little, she had once gently blown on his wounds too, while she had regarded it as nothing more than childish play. His expression darkened slightly as he asked when exactly she would finally be willing to see him as an adult. When they arrived on set to film the snowy train station scene, Gu Kai went to find Jiang Lan once again. The director called action, and they began performing that farewell scene. She told him to keep a low profile and promised she would bring their older brother back. For the character she played, it was a farewell full of hope, but for the character he played, it was the end. As the train whistle sounded, he suddenly leaned out from the window and desperately seized her lips, giving her a kiss without permission. The director immediately shouted, "Cut!" Gu Kai's older brother punched the pillar in irritation, seeing that the scene had already failed 7 times. He sarcastically demanded to know whether Gu Kai was fated to have problems in every kissing scene with Jiang Lan. Then he ordered the two of them to go practice alone in another room until they got it right. At last, Jiang Lan asked him what exactly was troubling him. Gu Kai's voice was taut as he confessed that he could no longer tell where the boundaries of the role truly ended, and where he himself began. She tried to comfort him, saying that every actor went through a state like this, but his despair cut her off. He admitted that as long as the other person was her, he would be afraid that once he crossed that final line, there would be no going back. Gu Kai was trapped between fiction and reality, and the one fear crushing the breath from him was this: once he crossed the boundary, there would be no return. His scene partner, the veteran actress Jiang Lan, saw his pain with perfect clarity. Her eyes were full of understanding as she comforted him, telling him that she too had once struggled from becoming too immersed in a role. He confessed that he could no longer tell the difference between the character and his real self, and that fragility hung between them. Jiang Lan seized the moment and suggested they switch roles to rehearse the key scene. She would play his character, Li Changjiang. She explained the script's silent stage direction. Li Changjiang kisses Su Kaming, a confession that needs no words, completely drowned out by the train whistle. That moment had to be filled entirely with emotion, carried through with an understanding beyond language. The scene struck Gu Kai deeply, mirroring all those lonely nights when he stared at his phone, waiting for her messages. Behind every casual greeting he sent was an unspoken sentence. Again and again he typed, "I miss you," only to hesitate and delete it. His longing had always been buried beneath a professional exterior. Back in the rehearsal room, the boundaries blurred completely. He leaned in close, his voice low and hoarse, softly saying that he couldn't hear what she was saying, forcing her to step backward as he advanced. Then he slipped entirely out of character and directly called her Jiang Lan, accusing her of not being focused enough. Intense emotions surged beneath the surface as he reminded her that this had been her idea, even asking if she really needed a junior actor to teach her. Before she could answer, he closed the last bit of distance and kissed her. This was no longer rehearsal, but the naked, blazing eruption of feelings that had been suppressed for too long. She was stunned, stunned, her mind screaming that this was wrong, that she should push him away. This kiss had long since strayed from its original purpose. But another tempting voice deep inside her urged her to accept it, enjoy it, sink into this moment. In the end, she gave in, letting herself get lost in that burning, damp touch as everything around them gradually disappeared, until he teasingly used his teeth to pull the hair tie from her hair. His gaze locked onto hers as he declared that he no longer wanted to call her sister. That form of address was like a barrier, and he had decided to shatter it, asking if she would allow him to take one step further. Then the scene melted into a beautiful yet heartbreaking fantasy. The characters they played embraced on a snow-swept platform and fell in love before their final parting. It was a perfect, sorrowful dream until Jiang Lan jolted awake in bed. A storm raged outside the window, and then the doorbell rang. She walked over and found Gu Kai standing in the hallway outside. He was carrying breakfast and explained that today's filming had been canceled, and that this was just an excuse to stop by and see her. As she turned to make coffee, she was filled with unease because Gu Kai looked completely normal, as if that kiss that could have changed everything had meant nothing at all. She suddenly felt ridiculous, as though she alone was still suffering over the line they had crossed. Distracted, she fumbled with the hot water. In the next second, he rushed over, grabbed her hand, and pulled her into his arms. His touch sent a jolt through her body, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. The two of them froze there, so close it felt as if they would kiss again the next second, but then the doorbell rang once more, completely shattering the moment. Their rare day off was interrupted just like that. The visitors were the lively, outgoing actress Jiagwa and the sly, silver-haired man Zian. The moment he walked in, he bluntly asked if he had interrupted their private time together. To lighten the mood, Jiagwa suggested a game of truth or dare. Zian drew the Joker card right away, and a wicked smile immediately appeared on his face. Clearly, he intended to use this chance to expose the painfully obvious tension between Gu Kai and Jiang Lan. He brought up their disastrous kissing scene, saying that after practicing alone together, they had miraculously gotten it right, and therefore something must have happened between them. So he chose dare and ordered numbers 1 and 3 to do a princess carry. But his plan fell apart. Jiagwa excitedly announced that she was number 3. She squealed and threw herself into Jiang Lan's arms, thrilled beyond measure, even asking Gu Kai to take a photo to commemorate the peak moment of her life. The result left Gu Kai speechless and Zian equally defeated. The game continued, but Zian kept missing his chance and never managed to pair up the two people he wanted. At last, fate tipped the other way. Gu Kai drew the Joker card. The room instantly fell silent, and he chose number 2. Jiang Lan. Looking straight into her eyes, he asked the unresolved question that had always hung between them. Did she like someone? She tried to dodge the answer, but he pressed her step by step, saying that the fact she couldn't answer was itself the answer. Then he dropped another bombshell, admitting that he really had fallen for someone, and that it had started yesterday. The answer, which all but pointed directly to their kiss, stunned everyone present, and his own face flushed red with surging emotion. Later, after everyone else had left, Gu Kai collapsed onto the bed, his mind in complete chaos. He picked up his phone, trying to find the right words to ask what she really thought of his confession. He was irritated that she had thrown him into such turmoil while he still had to pretend to stay calm. Just then, a message from Jiang Lan suddenly appeared on the screen. Open the door. His heart nearly stopped. When he opened the door, she was standing there with a serious expression. She told him she knew what he wanted to ask, and that his confession was just as real for her. She admitted that these feelings had actually existed for a long time already, and that he had long since become an irreplaceable part of her life. Completely overwhelmed, Gu Kai pulled her inside and clasped her hand tightly. Pinning her against the door, he kissed her with a mix of urgency and unease, finally pulling the woman he wanted to spend his life with into his arms. The drama's final scene wrapped beneath a sky full of artificial snow. A heartbreaking death scene brought the entire production to a close. The moment the director called cut, all the actors knew that their story on screen had ended. At the wrap party, everyone raised their glasses in celebration. The boss of Jiang Lan's company thanked the crew for taking care of the newcomer Gu Kai. But for Jiang Lan, those polite smiles and industry small talk gradually faded into the background, and her thoughts drifted toward an entirely different image. The intimate, private moment between her and Gukai in her room. She remembered his arm around her, remembered that gentle kiss, and suddenly realized that their relationship was nothing like what outsiders assumed, not just a simple older sister-younger brother bond. Lost in thought, she took a sip of wine. Just then, a fellow cast member quietly reminded her scene partner, Lai Chung-chung, that it was time to act. Late that night, Jiang Lan could barely stand, leaning heavily against Gu Kai as he supported her through the hotel corridor. He scolded her for drinking too much, while she drunkenly insisted she was fine, even arguing that this kind of occasion wasn't something to dump on a kid like him. He helped her into the room and settled her onto the bed, but she muttered vaguely that she didn't need him taking care of her. Gukai looked at her with a gentle expression tinged with faint heartache. Noticing that she hadn't even taken off her shoes, he bent down and carefully removed them for her, worried that he might wrinkle her expensive couture gown. But just then he lost his balance for a moment, and his heart instantly started pounding in his chest. He tried to wake her, but in her sleep, she grabbed his hand. She softly murmured his character's name. Gukai sat down by the bed, holding her hand tightly, and asked in a low voice what her plans were for the new year. When she said she had no plans, his face reddened slightly as he cautiously asked whether he could go to her home and spend the new year with her, adding that they needed to have a serious talk. Later, Jiang Lan woke up alone, her mind replaying all those moments when they had nearly lost control, when he asked her to help zip up his costume, when he asked her for a towel, the glances they stole at each other, and that undeniable kiss. A heavy realization finally settled in. Their relationship had already become something she could no longer face calmly. After making up her mind, she made a call and canceled a brand event at the last minute, announcing that she suddenly had New Year plans. Meanwhile, Gukai stood beneath scalding water, murmuring her name over and over, his mind full of how she truly saw him. On New Year's Eve, they sat together in her apartment, clinking glasses softly as they quietly celebrated the arrival of the new year. She sighed that it had been a long time since she had spent a holiday at home, and that it was all because she had always been too busy. From her, he sensed a kind of distance that felt both familiar and strange. He had once wanted to be independent and move out, but everything in her home, the matching slippers, the paired cups, silently showed that this had always been a place where he was welcome to return. She took the initiative to remind him that he had said he wanted to talk. Gukai took a deep breath and directly asked how she really saw him, then pressed further, asking what kind of sister and brother relationship involved hugging and kissing. Jiang Lan stiffened for only a moment before her professional mask returned to her face. She raised a hand and touched his face, casually reducing his feelings to residual chemistry from acting opposite her, even lecturing him not to underestimate an actor's professionalism. But he did not back down. He brought out a New Year gift, a handmade miniature scene with the two of them inside it. The gift silently proved that the bond between them was far more than ordinary dependence or closeness. She thought of how their relationship had shifted from dependence into companionship, and how familial affection and romantic love did not necessarily have to exclude each other. But for him, that was still far from enough. He told her he was greedy. He said he wanted more. Kneeling before her, he listed his desires one by one. He wanted to cook with her, watch TV with her, share a wardrobe with her, and wake up every morning in the same bed. Then he opened a small box, and inside lay 2 rings. He declared that he wanted all of this, not as family, but as her lover. Looking into her eyes, he finally said everything in his heart. Jiang Lan, I love you. That confession completely shattered her composure. In a panic, she fled the apartment, his words and all their kisses replaying non-stop in her mind. In the elevator, she barely managed to catch a breath, but her thoughts were in total chaos. Then she hurried to another apartment and frantically rang the doorbell. When the door opened, the person standing inside was her friend Tang Ji, an independent photographer. Seeing the big star in such a disheveled state, Tang Ji was clearly startled. After going in, Tang Ji sighed that ever since they graduated from college, they had rarely been able to meet as often as before. Meanwhile, Jiang Lan's gaze landed on the travel photos Tang Ji had taken. When she asked about the man in one of the photos, Tang Ji casually said it had only been a brief romance. In return, she found it strange that a workaholic like Jiang Lan would suddenly take an interest in her love life. Then Tang Ji noticed the marks on Jiang Lan's neck, her eyes instantly widening as realization dawned. "You slept with your little brother?" she blurted out. Jiang Lan immediately flushed and panicked, quickly denying it and saying it hadn't gone that far. She admitted that she liked him and had originally planned to confess too, but he had moved too fast, and they really had only kissed. But she was afraid of losing control, afraid of doing something she could never take back, and confessed that what truly frightened her was how direct he was. Tang Ji mercilessly laughed at her, saying that despite filming so many romance scenes, she still reacted like an innocent young girl, and reminded her that she had already been a workaholic back in college. But then her tone softened. She pointed out that the fact Jiang Lan had come running to see her in pajamas in the middle of winter over a relationship problem was itself enough to prove how deeply shaken she was. Tang Ji's advice was simple to the point of cruelty. She was just stuck right now. Since her heart had already moved, she should seize it. Her final words struck Jiang Lan hard. After 30, the feeling of truly being moved is rare and precious. Jiang Lan's heart began pounding with extraordinary clarity. To Jiang Lan, love had always been like a minefield, especially since her best friend Tang was now entangled with a rising idol like Shao Kai. Any scandal could become a disaster. Jiang Lan glared at her friend, frustration surging inside her as she reproached Tang for being too impulsive, while Tang could only guiltily admit that she really had made a mistake. Meanwhile, Gu Kai was trapped in a private hell of his own. He sat there in silence with his head buried in his hands. Fireworks ballooned outside the window, a sharp contrast to the torment inside him. The events of that night kept replaying in his mind. Tang's gentle gaze as she looked down at the ring, and the hopeful kiss he had offered on his own initiative, and how what had originally been just a simple promise had grown heavier and heavier as he kept asking for more, until his own desire had completely betrayed him. Now shame swallowed him whole. He was convinced he had scared her, convinced that her hasty departure was a sign of disgust, and he couldn't help wondering whether she was angry or even disappointed in him. On Jiang Lan's side, she changed tactics, handing Tang a piece of cake and urging her to eat it and then go apologize to that poor puppy. But Tang refused, saying she needed to maintain her figure for her next role and had long since quit sugar, though Jiang Lan saw through at a glance that it was only an excuse. She exposed Tang's pretense on the spot, reminding her that before her debut, she had loved sweets most of all. The words hit the mark instantly, and Tang's forced composure collapsed on the spot. She spoke the most painful truth of being an award-winning actress. She didn't dare eat the food she liked, and she didn't dare embrace the person she liked. Desire was originally something very simple, like a piece of cake. You could choose not to touch it. But after suppressing it for too long, that sweetness became impossible to resist. Jiang Lan listened in surprise and asked whether she had made the cake herself. Tang smugly shot back. What, was she planning to learn baking for the sake of her little puppy? Meanwhile, as time ticked by, the hope in Gu Kai's heart slowly dimmed, and the clock had already passed 11:30 at night. He sat there alone, tortured little by anxiety, his gaze falling on the ring box on the table that no one had touched. His heart sank bit by bit. It felt as though he had been rejected. He remembered how foolishly he had once said that if one day she no longer needed him, he would leave, and he clenched his fist in frustration. But just outside his door, Tang was hesitating, unsure how to apologize without sounding too mushy. She took a deep breath and finally opened the door. Yet what greeted her were Gu Kai's heartbroken eyes. Seeing her standing there with a suitcase beside her, he immediately imagined the worst possible outcome, and, his voice trembling, asked where she was going so late at night. Then his eyes fell to her hand, and he saw that ring. His eyes reddened almost instantly, confusion mixing with immense relief. She asked what was wrong, but he only repeated the question he had just asked. His voice was already choked with emotion. Tang immediately dropped what she was holding and threw herself into his arms, hugging him tightly as she hurriedly explained that she had only gone to see a friend. He hugged her back just as hard, admitting that he had thought she didn't want him anymore. She instantly shattered his fear, assuring him that she would never leave him. After going inside, she saw the packed suitcase already sitting on the floor and only then realized that he had really believed she was running away from home. He voiced his unease again, reminding her that they had agreed from the start that only after he had made something of himself in his career would he be able to stand by her side with enough dignity. But he could no longer hold himself back. Tang froze, finally understanding just how deeply her every move tugged at his fragile heart. She knelt in front of him, took his hand, and apologized for leaving without saying a word. She explained that she had only panicked because compared to his gift, the return gift she had prepared felt far too shabby, so she had rushed out to find a jewelry store and buy him a matching ring. She told him that a relationship sustained by passion alone could never last, so she wanted to give him a promise. Gently, she slipped the ring onto his finger. It was her answer to his confession and also the vow she was making. She suggested that tonight they exchange rings first, then quietly hide the other one away, as a symbol of their relationship, with one half shown to the world and the other still kept hidden, until the whole world was ready to accept them. She threaded his ring onto a necklace and had him wear it around his neck, turning it into a secret treasure kept close to his heart. That was the oath she made to protect her career, her lover, and everything she cherished. Overcome by her feelings, she climbed onto his lap, pulled him close, and gave him a burning kiss. In a low voice, she admitted that tonight she was not sure she would be able to stop halfway, then flashed him a teasing smile and told him to go shower first. After that, the two of them shared an intimate and heated reconciliation in the bathroom, and at last, she said the words he had always longed to hear. Elsewhere, in the back seat of a luxury car, a man named Gu Chung was on the phone when he learned from the news that rumors were spreading that he was seeing someone. A scandal had broken out. Young idol Gu Kai had been photographed entering the home of a top actress. Gu Cheng's assistant told him that the fans all believed it was just publicity for a new drama. But Gu Cheng had no interest in that and only ordered them to warn Gu Kai to keep a lower profile. He said coldly that he could tolerate a secret relationship, but if it turned into a public spectacle, he would handle it personally. The scene then shifted to Valentine's Day, where a woman named Emma was on her way to a blind date at Corner Cafe. The moment she stepped inside, she immediately saw her date, and it was Gu Cheng. At first, she was attracted by his handsome appearance, but the illusion shattered completely the moment he opened his mouth and asked her for her blind date resume. His personality instantly put her off. The date turned into a total mismatch disaster. She liked watching movies, while he liked investing in them. He could even turn casual small talk about her company into a business deal. After a grueling 50 minutes, the two of them sat there in silence, each tapping away on their own laptop. Unexpectedly, they actually finalized a business partnership. Thoroughly fed up, Emma stormed into a luxury boutique, declaring that shopping was the only cure for irritation. Outside the store, Gu Cheng texted a friend to report on the blind date, saying he had felt nothing at all. Just then, a notification popped up on his phone. It was a post from an actress named Tong Meng, and it looked like she was being followed by fans. A faint smile, rare for him, appeared on Gu Cheng's lips as he replied that he had seen it. Just then, Emma came out of the store and happened to catch that smile. She froze for a moment, never expecting a man that cold to smile at all. She made one last attempt and asked him which of the two handbags looked better, and to her surprise, he gave her a crisp, decisive answer. But when she asked what she should do next, he cut her off directly, saying the date could end early. She should go find the people who could truly make her smile. After his car sped away, he called Tong Meng and told her that he knew she was being followed and was already on the way to pick her up, scaring the young actress into immediate panic. President Gu's rare moment of peace was shattered by the frantic pounding on his car window, and what came into view was a bizarre figure wearing a rainbow-colored horsehead mask. That person, Gu Jintong, yanked off the mask, thanked him for saving her, and urged him to drive away quickly before the fan tailing her discovered where she was. Meanwhile, Gu Cheng was left staring in shock at the woman in front of him with rainbow-colored hair and a devil-themed cosplay outfit. But Jintong, sitting in the front passenger seat, was thrilled, admiring herself in the mirror and thinking she looked exactly like the heroine of her favorite Otome game, NTH Kiss. She even proudly showed off the merchandise she had managed to snag. Gu Cheng, however, had no idea what an Otome game even was. Her smug delight was quickly interrupted by a loud growl from her stomach. She had not eaten a single thing all day in order to maintain the perfect cosplay figure. Seeing her like that, Gu Chang suggested they stop for afternoon tea before heading back to the office. She agreed immediately. The two of them then headed to an upscale cafe, where she was welcomed the moment she walked in like a VIP. Her cosplay attracted plenty of attention, and the other customers all complimented her, saying she looked as if she had stepped straight out of the game. In contrast, Gu Chang looked deeply uncomfortable from head to toe and only wanted to pretend he did not know her at all. After entering the themed cafe, Jintang enthusiastically ordered from the special menu, choosing a sweet, heartwarming kiss set and a possessive CEO's pampering set. To Gu Chang's baffled expression, she explained that the latter was the signature meal of Gu Chun, the game's male lead. She described Gu Chun as the classic cold on the outside, warm on the inside, arrogant so type, annoying at first, but more and more lovable as the story went on. Gu Chang asked whether that was the type she preferred, and she instantly bristled, passionately insisting that she was a diehard supporter of another male lead, Jiang Lan, and absolutely not a fan of that workaholic Gu Chen. She simply could not understand why all the CEOs in that world just happened to share his surname. Their argument was suddenly interrupted by a waitress who had frozen in shock. The waitress recognized Jintang's perfect recreation of the character rock sweetheart. As a fellow fan, she then turned excitedly toward Gu Chang and naturally concluded that, with his overbearing CEO aura, he must be cosplaying Gu Chun. Gu Chang coldly denied it, which only made the waitress even more convinced that he was simply too immersed in character. Eyes shining, the waitress told them that the cafe was running a special event. If cosplayers took a photo together, their meal would be free. Gu Chang immediately said he was willing to just pay, but Jintang went on the offensive at once, pleading with him over and over with huge, pitiful eyes until he had no choice but to agree. During the photo shoot, the waitress kept instructing Gu Chang to smile and to look gentler, forcing him to squeeze out a stiff smile at the camera. By the end, Gu Chang looked utterly drained and sighed that he had never paid such a high price for a meal in his life. But when Jintang saw the finished photo, she was horrified, complaining that it looked exactly like a 40-year-old dad taking his daughter to a comic convention. She declared the photo completely beyond saving because there was not the slightest trace of affection in Gu Chang's eyes. Gu Chang calmly replied that he was simply not used to being photographed in public, then asked why she was so obsessed with this sort of thing. Jintang explained with great enthusiasm that the biggest appeal of Otome games was the fantasy of being loved unconditionally by a perfect man, and one who would never betray you. Realizing she had said too much, she hurriedly stopped, waiting for him to mock her childishness. To her surprise, Gu Chang nodded thoughtfully and admitted that it was indeed the kind of work that provided emotional value. Seeing that he actually understood, Jintang was overjoyed and immediately offered to download the game for him, but he refused flatly and brushed it off. She was not discouraged in the slightest. She simply snatched his phone and installed it for him herself, and he actually let her do whatever she wanted. Just then, a man walked up to their table, and Jintang's world instantly came to a halt. It was the real Jiang Lan. The celebrity praised her cosplay and asked if he could take a photo with her. Jintang panicked at once, worried that if the photo was posted online it would cause trouble. Before she could answer, Gu Chang had already stood up, declared that it was time to go, and forcefully dragged her away. Then he turned to look at the still-stunned Jiang Lan and announced that she was Mrs. Gu. As they left, Gu Chang casually asked her what CP cosplay meant, proving that he had taken in all the fandom slang she had been spouting. He leaned down slightly, warmth and sincerity shining in his eyes, more real than any expression ever generated by the algorithms in her game. That night, Gu Chang sat at his desk, looking at the photos of Jintang in cosplay on his phone while analyzing the IP value of NTH Kiss, a gentle smile resting on his lips. Elsewhere, Jiang Lan woke up beside her lover and murmured softly that it was time to set out. The two of them decided to make the most of their rare day off and properly visit a private beach. Jiang Lan skillfully set up the barbecue grill, leaving her partner full of admiration. He even grilled a skewer of meat himself and handed it to her. She deliberately teased him, saying it was a little dry and a little salty, then immediately declared that the flavor was unforgettable. When he asked what flavor it was exactly, she pulled him over and kissed him, then asked whether he liked her flavor. After some flirtatious teasing, she announced with an alluring smile that she wanted to go swimming, then untied her dress to reveal a brand new bikini. And when he told her to stop tempting him, she moved even closer and whispered that she was doing it on purpose. A moment later, the two of them exchanged a scorching kiss under the sun, bringing their first date to a perfect close. Far across the seas, Gukai wrote Jiang Lan a postcard saying that although the Mediterranean scenery was beautiful, his only regret was that she was not there beside him. Ever since leaving, he had been swallowed whole by overwhelming longing. His only comfort was rewatching her latest television drama, Timing, over and over again. On the screen, she was like a silent film forever frozen in his mind. After receiving his affectionate message and photos, and seeing his promise that he would return to her side as soon as possible, Jiang Lan smiled gently. At the same time, the drama they co-starred in, Approaching, became a massive hit, exploding both in ratings and on trending searches. Fans went completely wild over the on-screen chemistry between Jiang Lan and her co-star. At the official cast and crew thank you event, Jiang Lan stood alone at center stage. The male lead had yet to appear, so she quickly sent a message saying that she would attend on behalf of both of them. But on the other side of the city, after reading her text, Gukai curled his lips into a sly smile, got out of the car, and prepared to make a surprise entrance. While the audience below the stage was watching clips from the drama, a voice suddenly called out Jiang Lan, and Gukai himself strode onto the stage in a sharp suit, dazzling like a living spotlight. Jiang Lan's eyes widened in shock, while the audience screamed the name of his character, Chengjian. Beneath the brilliant stage lights, he took her hand, and the two reenacted the drama's key scene. As their fingers intertwined, streamers rained down from above. After the event, the director thanked them both for all their hard work. The lovers waved goodbye politely, then went upstairs together. But the moment no one else was around, their outward composure collapsed instantly. Gukai pulled Jiang Lan tightly into his arms and murmured how much he had missed her. He explained that the director had arranged his surprise return precisely to help them continue concealing their real relationship. Just as he bent down to move closer to her, the elevator chimed, interrupting their reunion. Standing before them was a mysterious girl with short black hair and a lollipop in her mouth. She gave a brief introduction, then coolly commented that Gukai looked a lot like his father. Before the two of them could react, she had already turned and left, leaving behind only a meaningful promise that they would be seeing him again very soon. Alarm bells immediately went off in Jiang Lan's mind, and full of suspicion, she pressed Gukai about who exactly the strange girl was, worried that she had ulterior motives. She quickly found the girl's identity on her phone. Gu Jia, 19 years old, a young director who had already won countless awards at such a young age. Staring at the phone screen, Gukai admitted that he had never heard of such a person in the Gu family. He wrapped Jiang Lan in his arms to comfort her, and said he would handle it, promising to keep a close eye on that girl. He resolved that he would never let the tangled troubles of his family drag her into them. Later, Gukai learned from the company president that Gu Jia was the younger sister of his cousin, Gu Wang's son, the very same worthless man who had once harassed Tong Meng. Worse still, the president handed him a script for Crows of the Dark Knight and revealed that director Gu Jia's team intended to invite him to star in it. At the audition site, Gukai was told to wait first, but when he saw Gu Jia inside, directing Tong Meng's audition for the female lead, his expression immediately darkened. When he noticed a bottle of vodka sitting beside Tong Meng's juice, suspicion instantly rose in his heart, and he realized something might be wrong. Without a word, he strode over, snatched up the cup, and took a sip. The moment the liquor touched his tongue, his face changed. On instinct, he immediately pulled Tong Meng away and warned her in a low voice to be careful of Gu Jia. But their private conversation was soon interrupted by Gu Jia herself. She revealed a startling fact. She was Gu Wangsuan's sister. While Tong Meng was still in shock, Gu Jia lifted her chin with a smile and mockingly said, what a coincidence it was that her production now had both her brother's ex and her own cousin in it at the same time. However, she had no intention of taking revenge. On the contrary, she suddenly burst out laughing and said excitedly that someone had finally taught her useless brother a lesson. Only then did Gukai realize that the bottle of liquor was not a trap at all. It had merely, by chance, been her way of helping Tong Meng get into the mindset of a forceful character. With her fighting spirit reignited, Tong Meng immediately declared that she had no need for any petty tricks. She would win the role on acting alone. Elsewhere, the company president watched as Tong Ming threw herself into practice with an entirely new intensity, leaving even the surrounding staff astonished by her complete transformation. When he pushed open the practice room door, he found that she was already fully immersed in the role, viciously flinging the script aside and cursing it as trash. Then, halfway through rehearsal, she stumbled and fell straight into his arms. He handed her a carton of milk and softly told her not to starve herself anymore, but she explained that she was doing it for the role and also to prove her ability to Gujia. The moment the director's name came up, the president's expression darkened. In a dimly lit room, Gu Jia was calmly flipping through her casting list. Then she picked up Tong Ming's photo, looked at it with open disgust, tossed it into the trash, and coldly cursed it as garbage. Meanwhile, Gu Kai relaxed as the stylist gave his hair its final touches, and she asked him whether her skills were just as good as the company's famous Tony's. Looking at his refreshed reflection in the mirror as he prepared for his new role, Songya, a young man from the underworld, he admitted that he still was not used to the light-colored hair. She comforted him by saying it was cute and made him look like a golden retriever. The originally professional atmosphere gradually turned ambiguous as she leaned down and gently kissed him. That embrace was full of love left unspoken. Gu Kai sighed and slowly pulled away, saying he truly did not want to leave at all, but he still had to go to acting class. Director Gu Jia had arranged a strict training schedule for him, and he also mentioned that Tong Ming, who was in the same production, was working even harder than he was. He put on a hat, preparing to go out and conceal his identity. Before leaving, he promised her that once he came back, they would continue what had just been interrupted. But when he stepped outside, rumors were already spreading everywhere. A trending topic had suddenly appeared online saying that someone had seen him and Tong Ming at the same acting training institute, triggering speculation that they would be co-starring in Gu Jia's new suspense film. Online opinion immediately turned vicious. Netizens mocked Tong Ming for overestimating herself, saying she had delusions of playing a villainous woman, and even accused her of trying to seduce the male lead. During a live stream, Tong Ming personally addressed the rumors, confirming that she really was filming a new drama. She asked her fans not to pay attention to the malicious comments and humbly admitted that she was still a newcomer and would keep working hard. But her efforts were completely useless. The official cast announcement for the new horror film Dark Knight Crows dropped like a bomb. Gu Kai would play Songya, while the role of Zhu Zheng will be played by an actress named Suyu. Tong Ming had been replaced, and the internet even burst into cheers, celebrating her humiliation. Caught completely off guard, Tong Ming frantically called director Gu Jia, her voice trembling as she demanded to know why he had suddenly replaced her when they had gotten along so well before. But the answer she got was cold and cruel. Her acting simply did not meet the standards of his film. That was how the call ended, leaving her speechless in shock. But her nightmare was not over yet. Another scandal exploded online, this time accusing the popular actress of dating President Gu Chung, painting her as a woman who used men to climb her way to a role. Looking at those vicious comments, it felt like her whole world was starting to collapse. Then the company sent another message, telling her not to come to work for the time being, in case she got secretly photographed again. All the pressure crashed down on her at once, completely breaking her. She threw herself onto the bed and burst into tears. When the doorbell rang, she shakily got up to see who had come. Through tear-blurred eyes, she saw a familiar face. Sister Lan. Tong Ming completely broke down and threw herself into Jiang Lan's arms, sobbing that director Gu Jia and President Gu were both ignoring her now. Jiang Lan comforted her, saying that President Gu had actually sent her. Tong Ming stared blankly, thinking, wasn't he angry with her? Jiang Lan explained that the company was worried the rival side might keep making moves, so they wanted to protect her first and keep her from being photographed again. She told her to treat this time as a vacation and promised they would handle the crisis. To cheer her up a little, Jiang Lan even brought out a special combo meal released by that idol-endorsed brand. Jiang Lan and Tong Ming were both a little flustered, stammering as they explained that what they liked was the bonus merchandise that came with the meal, not the food itself. Inwardly, she marveled that she had always thought President Gu was cold and distant, but this thoughtfulness proved otherwise. He knew exactly how to help her get back on her feet. She suddenly realized that Shop did not offer delivery at all, which meant he must have gone to buy it himself. While the two women spent the whole day distracting themselves from the outside world by playing games, another storm was brewing on a desolate rooftop. Gu Kai stopped Suyu, the actress who had replaced Tong Ming. Looking smug, Suyu correctly guessed that he had come because of Tong Ming. She claimed she had long known about the rumors between Tong Ming and President Gu, and that Tong Ming had to be replaced to protect the film's reputation. But back in the office, President Gu Chung flatly rejected that explanation and told his assistant that the relationship between the two of them was purely professional. He knew director Gu Jia had another purpose. This was a dangerous game of chess, and everyone involved was nothing more than a piece on the board. Back on the rooftop, Gu Kai scoffed at Su Yu's explanation, because if Gu Jia had originally been willing to give Tong Ming a chance, then there had to be a deeper reason behind it. Su Yu's expression changed instantly. Her eyes glowed red as she leaned close to his ear and murmured a taunt, saying that before Gu Chung got dragged into scandal, she would make her move first. Before he could react, she viciously kicked him in the stomach. Then she called Gu Chung. The moment the call connected, she hurled the phone high into the air and let it smash heavily onto the concrete. She warned Gu Kai not to make wild guesses and accused him of being sent by Gu Chung to test her. Her voice was full of malice as she demanded to know why he trusted Gu Chung, then drove the knife in even deeper. Didn't he want to know who had really killed his father? That single sentence instantly shattered Gu Kai's composure and dragged him back to memories from 21 years ago. He saw his father collapsed in the pouring rain while a woman dressed like an angel rushed over to save him, introducing herself as a doctor and saying she would save him. That was the first time his parents met. A frail young master who had run away from home was saved by a woman and fell in love with her because of it. But one question had haunted him all his life. If she had saved him, then why had his father still died in the end? He demanded to know what Suyu really knew. She began telling a dark fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was a vampire duke and his two sons. The younger son had been born defective, and the duke decided to use the healthy blood of the elder son to treat him. Burdened with guilt, the elder son ran away, hoping to die beneath the sun, but he was discovered by an angelic nun. She refused to let him vanish like that and nursed him with great care. When he tried to starve himself, she even used her own blood to keep him alive. They fell in love and even had a child. Such a forbidden union was something the vampire duke could never tolerate. He forcibly separated them, imprisoned his own son, and snatched the child away from its mother. But even with all the power in the world, the vampire could never recover the one thing he had lost forever, the will to live. At the end of the story, the vampire died alone in a modern hospital bed, visited only by the ghost-like figure of his younger son. After Suyu finished the story, her voice was cold, as if savoring just how full of regret that life had been. Looking at Gu Kai, whose face was already wet with tears, she said that being given hope only to have it cruelly taken away was far more brutal than death itself, and asked him what he thought. The camera rolled, filming began, and Gu Chung was once again dragged into his most terrifying nightmare. He stepped through the doorway into a room stained with blood, where two bodies lay silently on the floor. His eyes widened in horror, and a heart-rending scream tore from his throat. He collapsed beside his mother's cold corpse as his whole world fell apart in an instant. This traumatic memory was a story he was forced to reenact again and again, and the one explaining that story to him was director Jiang Lan. She told him that his mother had once made an almost desperate promise in order to save his father's life. She discovered that the Gu family had a second son, and his bone marrow was a perfect match for his father's. So she begged him over and over to save his older brother, so that her child would not have to grow up without a father. The younger brother agreed to help, but on the day of the surgery, the donor disappeared. Afterward, Gu Chung knelt before the mourning hall, grief condensing into silent, icy rage. He crushed the white funeral bouquet in his hand. Watching his naked emotions through the monitor, Jiang Lan's expression was dark and unreadable. Later, on a barren rooftop, she bluntly asked him who he blamed for this tragedy: the old man who had torn his family apart, or the younger brother who had broken his promise at the most critical moment. The weight of that question followed Gu Chung all the way home. He sat alone, staring at an old photograph, sinking into grief. When Jiang Lan found him, her presence felt like a small comfort in the gloom. Seeing tears still lingering in his eyes, she gently touched his cheek. His emotions instantly burst through the dam. He confessed how lost he was, then pulled her tightly into his arms. He had to know, if he were terminally ill, would she save him? Unspeakable fear lay crushed beneath that question. Jiang Lan did not hesitate for even a moment. She promised that no matter how far away he was, no matter the cost, she would run to him. Even if saving him meant risking her own life, she would do it without hesitation. Gu Qing admitted in a trembling voice that losing her was a price he absolutely could not bear. The intensity of that moment made Jiang Lan think of a fairy tale about a vampire and a nun, a story connected to a picture book. It had been left behind by his parents. The two of them searched through the storage room and found an old box. Inside, they discovered Volume 2 of Vampire and the Nun. This story had been written by his parents. As Gu Qing read, a shocking truth surfaced in his mind. It turned out this was a sequel. In that instant, he understood everything. His mother had hidden the truth of their past inside this childish fairy tale picture book. He embraced Jiang Lan, called her his lucky goddess, and asked whether she was willing to face the past together with him. She agreed without hesitation, even if it meant danger. Gu Qing apologized for dragging her into the dark history of his family, but he could no longer hide anything from her. Jiang Lan smiled, because he was finally willing to let her enter his world instead of carrying everything alone as he had all these years. He admitted that he had always been afraid of burning her, but her wholehearted acceptance made him start wanting more, wanting a future where they shared everything with each other. Being with her made him feel strong and fearless, enough to face whatever came next. Meanwhile, at a glittering film festival, Jiang Lan walked the red carpet as a highly anticipated actress, while director Gu Jia and actor Gu Kai were promoting their new film on the other side. Another actress, Tong Ming, was also preparing for her dramatic entrance. She waved off her friends' worries about her old grudge with the Gu family's team, saying she had come precisely because she did not want them to think she felt guilty. In a nearby car, a man saw her stunning photos going viral online and immediately flew into a rage, hating that she had rejected his proposal only to be with Gu Qing and swearing to teach her a lesson. The moment Tong Ming stepped onto the red carpet, reporters immediately swarmed her with vicious questions, and one of them even implied that she had slept her way to the top. They even said she was being kept by Gu Qing. On the other side, Gu Jia watched the scene and instantly guessed that these reporters had been sent by the rival camp. Tong Ming showed no fear at all and snatched the microphone away. To everyone's shock, she actually followed their line of questioning and admitted it on the spot. Then she mockingly announced that her sugar daddy would invest in dozens of films for her. She ridiculed their tactics, saying that since they were going to spread rumors no matter what, she might as well make up something even more explosive herself. She then exposed the fact that their slander had already cost her a role that should have been hers, and warned them that this trick would never work again in the future. With that, she turned and left as if nothing had happened, leaving the media in stunned silence, and making Gu Jia find her bold counterattack rather interesting. Jiang Lan arrived at the glamorous event, and the moment she appeared, she drew countless eyes. But her nerves were stretched to the breaking point because she had been on guard against one particular person the whole time. The instant she saw Gu Kai standing with another woman, panic hit her, and she immediately turned to leave. But he was faster. He stepped directly into her path and calmly asked what exactly she was hiding from. Flustered, Jiang Lan insisted that they had to keep at least 3 meters apart, or they would be photographed in the same frame again. That was her desperate plea to avoid another scandal. Remembering the company's statements about handling public opinion, Gu Kai could not help suspecting that she was holding a grudge against him. He coldly asked whether her reaction to the aftereffects was a little too exaggerated. The question made her face instantly burn red as she realized he had seen everything. She demanded to know why he had not helped her back then, saying that in that scandal, she had been the only one getting attacked. But he answered with cold logic. He was someone behind the scenes, while she was an artist. Learning to deal with bad reviews was simply a required survival skill. His detached attitude made her heart scream at her to run, but once again he blocked her path and refused to let her leave. He added that, actually, she had handled things pretty well just now. Then he turned away to answer a call. She stood there in a daze. On the phone, Gu Kai's presence instantly became overwhelmingly oppressive as he ordered his men to suppress the media, delete all recorded footage, and immediately find out who was behind it. Meanwhile, the night also took a sudden turn for the worse for Gu Jia's older brother. security unceremoniously threw him out. He shouted that he had been invited and desperately yelled for his father to save him. But the old man showed no mercy, ordering his son to bear the consequences himself and immediately severing ties with him on the spot. The scene then shifted to Gukai arriving in front of a dim, run-down building. He recognized it as his father's old law office, a place he had not set foot in for more than 10 years. He explained to his companion that his mother had hidden an address and password inside the picture book, and he believed it would open a storage locker. They found the correct locker. Inside was a dust-covered envelope containing old case files. As Gukai flipped through those documents, his whole world collapsed. He had always believed his father had died of illness, but the file clearly stated that his mother, Wan Yuan, was the plaintiff in an attempted murder case, and the defendant was Gu Feng. Back at the premiere, Gu Feng himself had also arrived, bringing Gu Jia with him and smugly exchanging greetings with everyone. He walked up to Gu Kai and said that he really looked like his father, especially that stubborn expression that refused to admit defeat. Then, with a cruel sneer, he added that the expression was exactly the same as that shameless mother of his back then. Gu Kai clenched his fists, suppressing his silent fury while still maintaining his outward calm. He thanked the man for the compliment, wished him an enjoyable screening, and meaningfully reminded him that the post-credit scene would definitely be a surprise. The film Dark Knight Crows began to play, a tightly paced thriller whose climax centered on a rooftop confrontation. In the film, a woman desperately begged the male lead, saying revenge was meaningless. But he retorted that maybe others did not care, but he did. He declared that he had to seek justice for that wrongly killed soul, then shot her, and as she fell to her death on the rooftop, he wished his detective a happy birthday. As the credits rolled, the audience erupted into applause, but Jiang Lan started crying. Gu Kai asked her why, and full of regret, she said that such an outstanding female role had not been played by her. Gu Kai did not know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, the post-credit scene began, a shocking dashcam video. In the footage, a man who looked exactly like Gu Kai sat in a car with a woman. The warm, peaceful scene was torn apart the next second by a violent truck collision. The lights came up, and the man from the video, Gu Kai himself, appeared on the screen and addressed the stunned audience. He announced that he was about to tell a story even more absurd than the film they had just watched, and revealed that the two people in the car crash were his mother Yuan Yuan and his uncle Gu Cheng. Gu Cheng made a dark family history public. The Gu family had been dissatisfied that his mother had fallen in love with his sickly father, so they bribed doctors and staged a fatal medical accident. His father discovered the conspiracy and told only two people, his wife and his younger brother Gu Cheng. Gu Feng leapt up from his seat in a rage, roaring that it was all complete nonsense. Gu Kai remained unmoved and continued. They had originally planned to carry out the surgery in secret, but their whereabouts were still leaked. His mother was in a car accident on the way to the hospital and never saw his father again. As he spoke, the story instantly exploded online and shot to the top of trending searches across the internet within seconds. He revealed that the driver who had killed them had concealed the identity of a mastermind behind it. Later, another exactly identical car accident took the lives of his mother and his new father, Jiang Jingyuan. Immediately after that, copies of the lawsuit documents rained down from above onto the audience, clearly bearing the defendant's name, Gu Feng. Everyone in the theater turned to look at the terrified old man. Gu Jia tried to flee, but someone stopped him, leaving him no choice but to shout for Gu Kai to come out of the projection room. Gu Kai's voice echoed through the theater as he directly questioned Gu Feng. How could he still sit there wearing that fake smile, watching a revenge movie with the son of the people he had personally killed? Later, at the awards ceremony, Jiang Lan calmly and elegantly accepted the Best Actress award. When it came time to announce the winner of the most anticipated newcomer award, the moment Gu Kai's name was revealed, the entire venue erupted in discussion over his conflict with the Gu family. Since Gu Kai himself was not present, Jiang Lan accepted the award on his behalf. She thought to herself that she was now standing at the very height he had always dreamed of lifting her to. At the same time, Gu Kai stood there alone, thinking that he had finally kept his promise, finally able to stand with her on the same stage. Just then, a security guard informed him that someone had come to take him back. A moment later, he came face to face with the frost-faced Gu Hang. Later, Gu Kai told Jiang Lan over the phone that stirring up a massive public opinion storm was the safest path. Now that the whole world was watching, their enemies would instead not dare act rashly. Jiang Lan's assistant worried that Gu Heng might use his media connections to strike back, but Jiang Lan had long since prepared for that. She explained that the worst they could do was create another topic to divert attention, and most likely they would make an issue out of her scandal. She said she had already prepared a statement in advance specifically to deal with that situation. When the time came, she would speak without reservation and openly admit her relationship with Gu Kai, binding them together completely from then on, as partners standing side by side against the wind and rain. While taking a walk under the moonlight, the actress was in an especially good mood because she had just enjoyed a hearty meal. For someone who usually could only eat oil-free, salt-free leaves on set, this was truly rare. She sighed that lately she had practically been living like a sheep, perfect for counting when she could not sleep. The well-dressed man beside her let out a low laugh, finding her non-stop chatter unexpectedly amusing. Just as he said it was getting late and was about to take her home, he raised a hand and told her to wait a moment. He crouched down and pointed to a fluffy little white dog hiding beside his car. The actress was instantly charmed and blurted out, "What a cutie," while he casually picked it up. She could tell it was a very clean Maltese, but it had no tag, so it was most likely an abandoned pet. She took the whimpering little thing into her arms and said they could not just leave it there. It was far too small and had no way to survive on its own. When he asked whether she planned to keep it, she immediately nodded again and again. But with a serious expression, he asked why she was always so impulsive, reminding her that a dog was a living creature that required long-term companionship. If she wanted to raise it, then she had to be prepared to stay by its side day and night for its entire life. That kind of promise was not something to be made lightly. His words made her fall silent. She admitted that she was always on set and hardly ever went home, so she really could not keep a pet. But she did not waver, still deciding to find it a reliable owner. He gave a soft snort and said that would only make the dog more pitiful. When the time came, the little dog would only hate her, and he even suggested that if she did not want to take responsibility, she might as well leave it alone. Infuriated by his cold logic, she called him a cold-blooded capitalist. To her shock, he actually got into the car and drove away, leaving her there alone. She promised the little dog that she would definitely find an owner, then kept walking forward. Just then, the dog suddenly barked excitedly. It leaped out of her arms and ran toward a flower shop nearby. A woman rushed out, crying as she called its name, Chio Chio, then scooped it into her arms, too emotional to speak. The actress waved goodbye to the reunited owner and pet. Seeing things resolved so perfectly made her happy too. But when she turned around, she was shocked to discover that the man was still waiting for her. He raised a brand new dog collar and explained that since it was no longer needed, he could only throw it away. Only then did she realize that he had never abandoned her at all. He had gone to buy the collar because he thought she truly liked that little dog. He had even planned to suggest keeping the dog in his office for the time being, since his assistant liked dogs and could help care for it, so she could visit it any time she wanted. But now that its owner had been found, he stopped there and simply let the now useless collar hang at his side. Elsewhere, a silver-haired woman walked up to a young man named Gu Chung, raised a hand to touch his neck, and asked whether he was hiding something from her. He brushed it off lightly, saying he had merely fallen while avoiding the media and that it was nothing serious. But she was not fooled. Her gaze darkened as she directly demanded to know whether Gu Feng's people had laid hands on him. Gu Chung sighed helplessly and admitted that, as expected, nothing could be hidden from her. A few days earlier, he had just come out of a building and was still on the phone explaining his strategy, saying he planned to use fame as a shield because the most dangerous place was often the safest. Just as he told the person on the other end that the media had already spotted him, a man in a black mask suddenly attacked from behind and swung a steel pipe at him viciously. Just as the attacker raised the weapon again, the glaring headlights of a car suddenly lit up the alley, and the man immediately fled back into the darkness. At that moment, Gu Chung was sitting in that car, clutching his wound. The driver told him that although Gu Feng's case had already drawn attention, the investigation would still take time and urged Gu Chung to go abroad first to avoid the storm. He promised that his people over there would absolutely ensure his safety. But Gu Chung refused to run. His voice was full of stubbornness as he insisted that he was not afraid of them. The man sighed and said he knew the real reason reason. Gu Cheng simply could not bear to leave her. He warned that as long as Gu Cheng remained by her side, he would only become her weakness, a target Gu Feng could use against her. That brutal truth weighed heavily on Gu Cheng's heart. By the time he returned to the silver-haired woman's side, he could no longer hide his exhaustion. She told him that someone was watching him, and that his presence made her very worried. She asked when his flight was, and he answered, next Tuesday. He said he wanted to take a shower first, because the clothes he was wearing felt very uncomfortable. Just as he turned to leave, she called out to stop him. Her voice trembled slightly as she took off her coat, revealing the delicate lace slip underneath. Her fingers nervously rubbed the ring on her hand, and memories came flooding back. The proposal on the sofa, the laughter-filled happy days, and the times they had strolled by the sea together. He noticed that she had not brought a change of clothes, and she explained that she had already prepared a set for him. Seeing the tears in her eyes, he reached out and pulled her tightly into his arms. He asked what was wrong, and she finally confessed that although they had experienced long-distance separation before, this time she felt a deep unease in her heart. He comforted her, promising that he would be careful and would text and call her every day. He also told her a secret. Whenever he missed her in a foreign land, he would pick up a leaf, hoping that by the time they met again, he would have gathered an entire forest to give her. He solemnly swore that when he returned, he would hold her in front of everyone so that she could proudly announce that they were lovers. In Jejia's hospital room, aside from a steady drip of the four, the only sound left was the nurses whispering softly in the hallway. They were gossiping about the Gu family's misfortune, that useless son and that sickly daughter, practically turning into permanent residents of the hospital. Outside the door, Gu Hong clenched his fists. The contempt and malice in their words nearly shattered his composure. But soon, he arranged his expression again and walked in quietly. When Jejia woke up, she saw his gentle face, and he was pressing a finger to his lips, silently signaling for her to keep the secret with him. He suggested that they play a game. Many years later, on a bumpy flight, she thought of that scene once more. She said that as a child she had been frail and sickly, neglected by her family, and only Gu Hong had treated her as an equal, telling her that if the weak wanted to survive, they had to learn to use their brains. In the cold, deathly white hospital corridor, they became inseparable friends, two souls leaning on each other and keeping each other warm. Until one day, he proposed the ultimate game. It was a grand escape. The first stage was for her to borrow a nurse's uniform. The second stage was for her to come up with a flawless lie, saying she had seen him go to the rooftop, luring all the nurses away. The third stage was for him to cover for her so they could swagger straight out through the hospital's main entrance. After their successful escape, in the backseat of a taxi, he rewarded his little spy with a vampire novel, her favorite kind. He told her they were going to see his dearest older sister. At the time, she had only thought it was an exciting adventure, but now she knew the terrifying truth behind it. Her father had bribed Gu Heng's doctor and switched his medication, personally sealing off his path to survival. On the plane, that truth slammed into her like turbulence, shaking her so hard she could barely bear it. By then, Gu Hong had already lost everything, and she, a child who understood nothing, had become his only ally and his only hope of staying alive. They traveled a very, very long way before finally finding his sister, Yuan, but the long ordeal, combined with the poison her father had forced into him, finally dragged him down. Gu Heng's body could no longer hold on, and he collapsed into her arms. Even at the edge of life and death, the only thing on his mind was comforting her, telling her not to be afraid. In a low voice, he said that his wife and younger brother would arrive soon, and they would become the people in this world who loved her most. As his words fell, his hand dropped limply. His last breath was a desperate cry for help that no one heard, begging her to save him. That memory became like phantom pain, a wound that would never disappear. At the time, she was only a terrified, helpless child, desperately trying to call for help. Her tears soaked the phone, yet no one ever answered. She ran down that long, seemingly endless hospital corridor, her tiny figure shouting for sister, for a doctor, for Yuan, but no one could help her. In the end, she could only collapse into the empty hallway, crying and calling for Uncle Gu Cheng and Aunt Yuan to hurry. The scene shifted. The doctors announced that his heartbeat had stopped, the words echoing through the ward as they asked where the family members were. Back in the present, the person beside her on the plane cut straight to the root of her pain. She had always believed that she herself was the one who killed Gu Hong. She could only nod, guilt pressing down on her so heavily it felt almost physical. He keenly saw that she had carried this burden all along, desperately trying to find someone to blame. That was why she had targeted Gu Chung, trying to drive a wedge between people, because he had failed to arrive in time. Having it exposed to her face like that, Jejia felt foolish to the point of absurdity. But he gave her a strange kind of comfort, saying that her existence had once given Gu Hong a sliver of hope in the final moments of his life, allowing him to leave this world still able to trust one person completely. When the plane finally passed through the turbulence and the flight became steady again, it was as though some fragile piece inside her had finally begun to settle as well. In another world, the actress Tong Ming was flipping through a script with a face full of disgust. She complained that this kind of cliched romance plot was unbearably tacky, bluntly saying she would rather play a prouder female lead. But her agent told her she had no choice. This was a public relations move personally arranged by President Gu. Her agent showed her a news article saying that a new drama had cast an actress who looked very much like her, all for the purpose of suppressing the rumors that she was Gu Cheng's mistress. And the final step of this clever plan was for her to personally experience life as President Gu's real special assistant. Only then did she realize that in the entire plan, she alone had been kept in the dark, spun around like a fool by that fox-like, cunning man. Though she was seething inside, she still arrived at the soaring headquarters of the Gu Corporation and properly introduced herself. Gu Chung looked indifferent and did not even glance at her before handing her a schedule and telling her to ask Secretary Wu if she had any questions. At first, she sneered inwardly, thinking the job could not possibly be easier. At the beginning, the work really was simple, making coffee, arranging schedules, receiving deliveries. But when she faced a stack of folders that all looked exactly the same, she instantly panicked. She casually picked up one labeled unimportant, but when she opened it, it was full of photos of Gu Jia, along with evidence that Gu Jia was investigating her, and even planning to keep hyping up the scandal between the two of them. Gu Chang suddenly appeared and said directly that the materials were no longer useful, ordering her to destroy them all. Tong Ming immediately demanded to know whether he had known Gu Jia's plan from beginning to end. He merely replied coldly, "So what?" Then added, "Didn't I already solve the problem for you?" The truth came crashing down on her. Gu Jia had never been targeting her at all. From the very beginning, she had been targeting Gu Chung. He had clearly known everything, yet still let her walk into the fire, making her nothing more than an insignificant chess piece in this vast family game. The feeling of being used left her full of grievance. On the next business trip, she deliberately kept a stiff professional distance from him, even reporting the itinerary to him from several seats away on the plane. When he asked why she was sitting so far away, she replied coldly that it was safer for superiors and subordinates to keep their distance. He noticed her deliberate coldness. This newly born chill followed them all the way from the office into the hotel elevator. The distance between them even had a specific number now. He was staying in Presidential Suite 2208, while she had been assigned room 0404. A full 18 floors apart. Exhausted and aggrieved, Tong Ming threw herself onto the bed and wailed about how hard life as an assistant was. Just then, all the lights suddenly went out, and the room was instantly swallowed by a terrifying darkness. A shadow seemed to vaguely appear in the bathroom mirror. Terrified, she turned and ran all the way to the door of his suite. The moment it opened, she slammed straight into his arms, stammering that her room was haunted. In a panic, she showed him an article on her phone. It clearly stated that room 0404 had once been the site of a suicide and had been listed as one of the top 10 haunted hotel rooms. Gu Chung, unfazed, accompanied her back to the pitch-black room and calmly flipped the trip breaker back on. The room instantly lit up again, but she was still badly frightened, clutching his shirt tightly and warning him that there was a hanging ghost in the bathroom. He pointed casually, and it turned out to be nothing more than a forgotten bath towel hanging on the door. Then he explained that the so-called ghostly crying they had heard earlier was actually just the guest next door playing a horror movie too loudly. Just as she had finally let out a breath of relief, he added another chilling line. He had checked the news, and the rumors that this room was haunted were unfortunately true. Her fear instantly instantly came roaring back, and she immediately began praying frantically. Seeing how terrified she was, he asked whether she was really that afraid, then made a shocking suggestion. Tonight, she could sleep in his room. His words instantly stirred up her memories of that drunken night when she had confessed to him and even begged to stay in his room. She suddenly snapped back to herself and recoiled, solemnly declaring that such a suggestion was extremely inappropriate and amounted to workplace harassment. With an unreadable expression, he took back the room card, then proposed an even more baffling solution. Since she refused to stay in his room, he would stay in this haunted one tonight instead. President Gu insisted on switching rooms with Tong Ming, saying what sense did it make for the assistant to stay in the presidential suite while the boss stayed in a haunted room? Tong Ming instantly panicked and stammered that the one who was afraid of ghosts was him, not her. But he calmly retorted that he needed his special assistant to get a good night's rest because tomorrow's schedule was full. As he spoke, he even handed her a set of pajamas. Tong Ming was completely defeated, embarrassed, and flustered, and could only force herself to draw a line first, solemnly declaring that from now on, theirs would be nothing but a purely professional working relationship. But her mind was already in total chaos. She thought of all the ways he had treated her well before, even how he had comforted her when she was upset, making her almost truly believe that he liked her. Her eyes grew hot, and she blurted out the question, was it because he had used her and lured others into making a move that he now felt guilty? Her eyes shimmered with tears as she admitted that she had always felt she was only holding him back, a burden he had no choice but to bear. But President Gu calmly denied it, saying he had never felt guilty because he had investigated Gu Jia long ago, Gu Feng's daughter, and knew she had ulterior motives. He explained that his source had informed him early on that someone was fabricating rumors about him. He had only wanted to see how Gu Jia would use the matter, but he had not expected her to drag Tong Ming into it as well. He sincerely apologized to her and promised that next time he would act in advance and never let her get caught up in it again. He asked if she felt a little more at ease now, and she nodded shyly. He turned to leave and even wished her good night. Her composure instantly fell apart. He stopped at the door, not even understanding himself why he had explained so much to her in particular. When Tong Ming was left alone in the room, she threw herself onto the bed, her face burning red, silently screaming to herself over why she was blushing so badly. Just then her phone chimed. It was a message from him, asking if she was still scared. Her heart skipped a beat, and she wondered if he was finally going to say something important. She immediately opened the voice message and listened with eager anticipation, only for her hopes to be completely crushed the next second. His calm voice merely instructed her to organize the schedule for the day after tomorrow, adding that compared with reading novels, work would help her fall asleep better. She felt like her soul was about to leave her body. Internally furious, she cursed him as an evil capitalist, but could only grit her teeth and get up to keep working. Not long after, another message came. He had one more question for her, specifically why she had overthought things and assumed he might like her. She stared at the recalled message, her heart pounding wildly, but it was too late. She had already seen it. The corners of her lips lifted unconsciously into a smug little smile, and she thought to herself that her boss really was a bit silly. The next day, Tong Ming met Emma, the president of Ruwedding Apparel. Emma was clearly surprised. She had not expected the famous star Tong Ming to have become President Gu's special assistant. Tong Ming, meanwhile, smiled brightly and introduced herself as Zhao Ming, ready to be at anyone's beck and call. Emma was utterly baffled and could not make sense of what game the two of them were playing. Tong Ming led her into the office, which was filled with all kinds of adorable cat-themed items, a sharp contrast to President Gu's usual minimalist and abstinent image. She had just served Emma some tea when President Gu walked in, his expression as cold and stern as ever. Emma teased him, saying she had originally thought he was a boring man, but had not expected his taste to be so interesting. He lightly brushed it aside, saying it was all his assistant's idea. Only then did Emma realize that this kind of indulgence was itself a form of pampering. Getting down to business, President Gu said he intended to cooperate with Tong Ming and asked about her schedule and fee. Later, at the shoot location, Tong Ming became the model, wearing a green long dress and looking so beautiful she seemed almost unreal. Emma, who was directing the shoot, was a perfectionist, striving to capture the confidence and beauty of women of every figure. Watching from the side, Tong Ming could not help feeling that Emma and President Gu really looked especially well matched. She thought again of that recalled message and kept telling herself that in reality, a rational boss like him would only choose a woman who could help his career in the end, not some foolish girl from TV drama. After getting back into the car, she said irritably to her manager that her mind was in complete chaos and she did not want to keep being President Gu's assistant anymore. Meanwhile, President Gu was sitting in his office when his secretary told him that Tong Ming had already joined the shoot yesterday. He merely said flatly, "No wonder it's been so quiet lately." When the secretary asked about the things she had left behind, he casually instructed, "Just leave them there for now." Later, at the press conference for a new product launch, Tong Ming, as the spokesperson, stood elegantly before a giant aquarium, watching the fish. Suddenly, a voice behind her said that she had finally been willing to give herself a break. She turned around and discovered that the person behind her was actually President Gu. She was a little flustered, thinking of the rumors in the company about blind dates. She asked if he had come to see his fiancée. He explained that he and Emma had simply become business partners after a failed blind date, and that the reason he chose to work with Ruoding was because he valued her abilities, not because of favoritism. Then he handed her a huge bouquet of flowers and explained the second reason he had come. He was here to see the spokesperson. As she watched him extend the flowers toward her, her heart thundered in her chest. But in the next second, her expectations were completely shattered. He explained that the advertisement she had filmed had received an excellent response, and the company wanted to sign a long-term partnership with her. The bouquet was only to celebrate the successful collaboration. She kept reminding herself not to overthink, while he asked whether she had any plans after the event, saying he wanted to treat her to a late-night meal. Alarm bells instantly rang in her mind, and she subconsciously assumed it was either new work or another one of his schemes. But he merely said calmly that it was neither. He was just bored. Without an all-capable assistant to eat with him, he felt a little lonely. The sudden trace of vulnerability he revealed made her brain crash on the spot. What shocked her even more was that he really did bring her to a lively roadside barbecue stall. She immediately lowered her head and dug in, marveling inwardly at how delicious everything was. Just as she was eating happily, two fans recognized her and ran over asking for autographs. Seeing that a crowd was about to gather, President Gu merely snapped his fingers lightly and calmly asked the owner what today's revenue was. Then he slapped his wallet onto the table and said he was willing to pay triple the price to reserve the entire stall for her alone. Tong Ming nearly sprayed out the drink in her mouth. She was so stunned by his absurdly over-the-top move that she could not say a single word. Under the moonlit city streets, the purple-haired woman let out a satisfied sigh. She had finally eaten her fill. She complained that the diet control during filming was far too strict. Every day, it was either oil-free food or leafy greens like rabbit feed. Joking that if this went on any longer she would turn into a sheep, she chattered on without stopping. The man sitting beside her, dressed in a sharply tailored suit, wore a faint smile on his lips and found her non-stop muttering oddly cute. Just as he was about to take her home, he suddenly stopped and pointed to something by her feet. It was an abandoned puppy, a fluffy white Maltese, and she thought it was adorable at first sight. She picked the little dog up and found that it was clean, but had no tag, so it had most likely been abandoned. She felt that such a tiny dog could never survive on its own and excitedly decided on the spot to take it home. But the man reminded her not to act on impulse, because raising a dog required long-term companionship. His words struck right at her weak spot. She spent all day on set and could not give a real home at all, so she decided it would be better to find a reliable owner. But he mercilessly pointed out that she was only making excuses and that pushing the puppy away like that was a little too pitiful. Irritated by what he said, she simply decided to find the dog and own her herself. Watching him seem to drive away, she muttered under her breath that he really was a cold-blooded capitalist. She promised the puppy that she would definitely help it find its owner. Just then, the little dog suddenly began barking excitedly. It leaped out of her arms, rushed into a nearby shop, and ran straight toward a woman. The woman called out its name, Chio, and pulled it into her arms, weeping with joy. She thanked Tong Ming over and over for bringing her baby back. In the end, the two waved goodbye and went their separate ways. But when she turned around, she was shocked to discover that the man was still there, and he was even holding a brand new dog collar. He admitted that he had never actually left because he had thought she truly liked the little dog. He had originally planned to let her keep the dog in his office so that she would always have a reason to come see him. The meaning hung quietly in the air. Looking at him, she finally understood that his intention had never been just about the dog. He was creating an excuse for the two of them to keep meeting. At the same time, elsewhere, the famous actress Jiang Lan was sitting at her vanity when she received a letter. Her assistant said it had been mailed from England, and the sender was Gu Kai. The assistant even joked that nowadays everyone used video calls, yet he was romantic enough to handwrite a letter. But when Jiang Lan opened it, she discovered that it was not a letter at all, but a complete autumn leaf with the words "Miss You" written on it in beautiful handwriting. A memory instantly flooded back. Gu Kai had once told her that every time he missed her, he would pick up a leaf and keep it with him. Holding the fragile token, she could not help wondering whether she ought to prepare a return gift as well. The scene shifted to a lush, green countryside where Jiang Lan was filming a program. A local girl excitedly told her how much she loved her work. As they walked through the beautiful scenery, the girl pointed to a red bean tree and said that in their village, people made bracelets from red beans and gave them to the person they liked, symbolizing that person as the one and only in their life. Just as Jiang Lan reached out to pick those bright red beans, a voice suddenly sounded behind her in greeting. The newcomer was a bespectacled man named Duan Zai. Holding a sprig of red beans, he asked whether she still remembered him. An awkward memory immediately surfaced. When they were young, Duan Zai had confessed to her, only to be coldly rejected. She had told him that she had to focus on her dream of becoming an actress and could not let romance distract her. Back in the present, the two sat together by the stream, smiling. He recalled that night, saying that at the time he had even told everyone that his first love was an ambitious woman who was destined to accomplish great things in the future. Jiang Lan looked at him, a little uncomfortable. As he poured her a drink, he said that after graduation he had gone to Australia, but recently had gotten an opportunity to return home for work. He was a producer. It turned out he was actually the investor who had come to visit the set. The moment he arrived, he directly asked whether she knew the hit competition show Ride the Wind and Break the Waves. She admitted that she was a loyal viewer, and he revealed that he was currently preparing the new season with her as his ideal guest. He hoped she would give him a chance, but she hesitated, reminding him that she was an actress, not a singer and not a dancer either. Duan Zai played his trump card, pointing out that her younger brother Gu Kai was a top idol, implying that she had the same talent for crossing into other fields. Far away in London, Gu Kai told his sister over the phone that he had already accepted the producer's invitation on her behalf and gotten her onto the show, all to help her seize this opportunity. Later, on set, the director teased Duan Zai, saying that he had come all this way just to see the goddess of his youth. Clutching that string of red beans tightly, Duan Zai silently wondered whether, after all these years, he still had a chance. Meanwhile, in the dance studio, as Jiang Lan concentrated on practicing the full dance, her movements unexpectedly carried a power that was both soft and strong. Standing in the doorway, Duan Zai stared in a daze, stunned by her raw and dazzling talent. The reason she improved so quickly was because her younger brother Gu Kai had been tirelessly guiding her through video calls. He praised her as a genius, corrected her movements, and encouraged her without reservation. Regretfully, he told her that he could only watch from afar and wished he could personally be by her side and dance with her. After practice ended, Duan Zai walked over to Jiang Lan and offered her milk tea, but she politely refused. Since she had already given it up, he could only watch her turn and leave, remaining behind alone. Work continued, and afterward, there was another stunning publicity photo shoot. By the time everything was over, it was already 3 in the morning. Exhausted, Jiang Lan returned home, and her phone had long since died. She discovered that her front door was not locked, and her heart immediately sank. Someone had broken in. She turned on the light and saw a strange suitcase in the living room, then noticed a pair of high heels on the floor that did not belong to her. Her fear kept spreading as she tiptoed toward the bathroom. Through the frosted glass, she saw 2 figures inside kissing. The door suddenly opened a crack, and a man emerged wearing nothing but a bath towel, water still dripping from the ends of his hair. The person was actually her younger brother, Gukai. Looking at her, he casually said that she was back, just a little late. Jiang Lan was stunned that her brother had suddenly returned to the country and asked why he had not told her in advance. He explained that he had called her several times and no one had answered, so he had come in person to check on her, adding that he had recently been busy filming an MV, and her phone had also run out of power. He pulled her tightly into his arms and asked how the results of his teaching were. She complained that after filming all day, she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. He comforted her, saying he knew how hard she had been working lately, which was why he had come back specially to help her secure the win. As he spoke, he lowered his head and gave her a burning kiss, then had her look at the table covered with dress design sketches and asked whether she had drawn them all herself. He confirmed that she had indeed drawn every one of them, because he believed his sister could carry any style. He first pointed to a Chong Sam look, saying it would evoke the elegant temperament of Splendid Dream. She said that still was not fresh enough, so he switched to a retro Hong Kong style, centered on a dangerous yet sexy sense of ambiguity. She admitted that set was indeed good, but still felt it had not broken her out of her comfort zone. Then, one of the design sketches completely caught his attention. He asked how she had come up with that concept. She explained that the inspiration came from an idea, that in this world, roses and snakes are the closest of friends. When night falls, they transform into each other, forming a beautiful yet deadly union, with the scarlet hue of a snake and the glittering scales of a rose. He told her that she was both the rose and the snake. Everyone has two sides, and he wanted her to show both sides on stage. He even promised that both the costumes and choreography would be designed entirely according to her preferences. He encouraged her to step onto the stage and conquer the entire audience with her strength. When she performed a blood-colored love story, the stage instantly turned into a magnificent crimson spectacle. It was a dark and powerful story, as if a heart had been ripped straight from a chest. She transformed into a hooded queen and commanded the entire stage with a fatal, seductive aura. She became a soul-stealing, almost dizzying presence, surrounded by fluttering butterfly shadows, with a skull in her hand. The audience below was completely stunned, all wondering whether this was really Jiang Lan. Her style was just too different from usual. The director was equally shocked, exclaiming that this was like watching a musical. He called her the Medusa of the stage, a Salome who could captivate and kill the audience with a single glance. Her performance was a huge success, and in the first public performance vote, she took first place outright. After returning to Jiang Lan's private dressing room, a disguised figure wearing a hat and mask walked toward her. It was her younger brother. She told him that she was extremely satisfied with his styling and had thoroughly enjoyed the thrilling night. He praised her performance, saying she was his exclusive muse. Then he told her that his vacation as her stylist was over and that he would be flying back to England today. Before leaving, he bent close to her ear and whispered that he wanted to leave behind a mark no one could ever forget, then pulled her into a deep, possessive kiss. He teased her, asking whether such a small reward was enough to satisfy her, and as he spoke, he lifted her onto his lap. He called her his little snake and asked whether she wanted him to let her taste the forbidden fruit. She admitted that she really did like it. Just as the two grew more intimate, a hurried knock suddenly sounded from outside the door. It was Duan Zai. Jiang Lan hurriedly told him to wait a moment, saying she was changing clothes. After her brother left, Duan Zai told Jiang Lan that the rough-cut sample for the editing stage was already finished, and the other ladies had all gathered in the studio as well. Then he looked at her brother and asked if he was Jiang Lan's younger brother. Her brother said he had no impression of him at all, then turned to Jiang Lan and asked why she had never told him that one of her college classmates was also a producer. She explained that Duan Zai was the dance teacher she had mentioned before, and that he had helped her a great deal. This time he had only come to visit the set. Her brother thanked Duan Zai, saying, "Thank you for looking after my sister, but I have to go now." The moment he heard he was heading to the airport, Duan Zai offered to give him a ride. Once they reached the underground parking garage, Duan Zai handed Jiang Lan's brother a business card and reminded him that some marks were better covered up. After that, he brought up the rumors circulating online about him and Jiang Lan, but added that he knew Jiang Lan was a complete workaholic and would never secretly date anyone. Her brother narrowed his eyes and shot back, asking if he was so eager to confirm the truth because he had already started doubting her. He pressed Duan Zai on what exactly their relationship was, since Jiang Lan had never mentioned him before. Then he added that he had already asked her manager and confirmed that she was currently single, and that those rumors were nothing more than mudslinging from rivals. In a sharp tone, he demanded to know what else Duan Zai wanted to ask, or was he planning to pursue her? After that, he stated outright that Jiang Lan was the only woman who could make his heart move. Sometime later, Jiang Lan won the annual championship, but she did not look happy at all. Her friend asked what was wrong and guessed that maybe something had gone wrong in her love life. Jiang Lan admitted that the producer had confessed to her. She recalled how, during the show's recording, Duan Zai had shown her favor at every turn, even getting drunk for her at a gathering, and finally confessing to her on the way back to the hotel, saying that he had liked her for many years and would always be there waiting for her. But her friend did not think much of it, believing that this gentle type stood no chance with a workaholic like Jiang Lan. She said Jiang Lan needed the kind of person who would go crazy for love and be forceful and domineering, someone who could pin her against a wall and kiss her hard. Jiang Lan blushed and said she had already rejected him and only wanted to keep being co-workers with him. But her friend insisted that she knew the most permanent solution, publicly announced that she already had a boyfriend. The thought lingered in Jiang Lan's mind. Standing at the doorway, she remembered those secret desires buried deep in her heart, disguised beneath the facade of a sibling relationship. She decided it was time to have a proper talk. She walked into the room, which was filled with gorgeous gowns he had designed especially for her. She found a red envelope with a note inside. It said that every outfit had been prepared for her, and that she would always have the right to say she wanted all of them. He had also enclosed a wedding dress design sketch, candidly admitting that it was a selfish wish to see her wear it with his own eyes. She smiled and softly said that she really liked it, and hoped that one day in the future she could wear it for him in private. Later, he called from London. He told her there was something he had been thinking about for a long time, and that now it was time to make everything public officially. A trace of resolve flashed across her face as she replied that this time it was her turn to make him come find her. In the bright, bustling airport, a stylish woman pulled her suitcase forward. Her name was Jiang Lan. Her gaze searched through the crowd until it locked onto the man in the leather jacket, Gu Kai. A smile bloomed across her face, and he pulled her into a warm embrace. This reunion felt just like coming home. Their journey continued through the romantic streets of London, their fingers intertwined like a perfect couple deeply in love. But they were not alone. Sharp-eyed fans quickly recognized them, recognized the beautiful Miss Jiang, and began speculating about who the handsome man by her side really was. Phones were pulled out one after another, shutters clicked nonstop, and in the blink of an eye, what had been a private moment became a trending topic. Completely unaware of the storm raging online, the two of them simply enjoyed each other's company, sharing an ice cream on the upper deck of a double-decker bus, immersed in a world that belonged only to them. Meanwhile, the internet had already exploded completely. During a quiet moment at the top of the London Eye, Jiang Lan glanced down at her phone and discovered that there were already 3 trending topics about their date. The whole world was guessing, and the fans were arguing endlessly. Were they siblings or lovers? A sly smile curled at her lips as she asked Gu Kai whether he was ready to give everyone an answer. His expression was calm and resolute. He simply nodded lightly, and the official announcement was posted. Gu Kai posted that she was his weakness and also his armor. Gu Kai officially announced that they were both family and lovers, completely making their relationship public. The news exploded like thunder, setting off enormous waves in fandom circles. In a distant office, Tong Meng stared at her phone, feeling as though her whole world had collapsed. She asked her colleague, President Gu, whether he had known about this all along, and his simple confirmation instantly plunged her into despair. Her goddess had really fallen in love with someone else. With red eyes, furious and upset, she shouted that Gu Kai was not worthy of Jiang Lan at all. Beside them, the assistant calmly reported to President Gu that this official announcement had already triggered 9 trending topics, and that public opinion was nearly spiraling out of control. But President Gu did not care in the slightest about the fans' reactions. He merely instructed his subordinate flatly that if they wanted to vent, then let them vent. The only person he cared about was the heartbroken girl in the office. He told her that a girl whose idol had fallen into a public relations crisis ought to go out and get some fresh air. As he spoke, he handed her the leash to his spotted little dog. An hour later, he found her in the break room. She had already finished walking the dog and had bought cake on the way back. He asked whether she felt any better now. Tong Meng explained that it was not that she opposed Gu Kai pursuing his own happiness. What really upset her was that she, his so-called #1 fan, had been kept completely in the dark and knew nothing, while it seemed like everyone else knew. President Gu pointed out that, given how dull she was when it came to relationships, it was perfectly normal that she had not noticed their secret romance. Then he stepped closer and asked exactly where she felt unwell after eating rum-flavored cake. Provoked by him like that, she immediately fired back, demanding to know what right he had to talk about her when he himself could not even see other people's feelings, even when they were laid out in plain sight. He asked in return who exactly this other person was. He bent down, bracing one hand against the doorframe and trapping her where she stood. In an even tone, he said that he saw things very clearly and had already given her hints and opportunities long ago. But she still stubbornly refused to admit that she felt anything. Folding her arms, she listened as he listed one by one all the things he had done for her, helping her handle public relations crises, wanting her to become his personal assistant, giving her flowers, taking her out to dinner, even giving her a little dog to keep her company. She argued that friends could do all that too, but he replied coldly that he had no friends, only subordinates. He told her that he had already treated her specially to this extent, yet she still had not noticed at all. She confessed that she was thick-skinned and could not understand roundabout words, so he would have to be more direct because she could not read minds. He moved close again, his face only inches from hers, and softly asked what exactly she wanted to hear him say. In her fluster, her mind went completely blank, and instead of answering with words, she acted on impulse, reaching out, grabbing his tie, yanking him lower, and kissing him. After a brief moment of surprise, he turned the tables and deepened the kiss, so overpowering that she was almost left breathless. Then he pulled back slightly and admitted that he was a neat freak and had never been intimate with anyone to this degree before, asking whether she believed him now. But she still stubbornly refused to believe him. A helpless smile brushed the corner of his lips as he called her a greedy little brat and said that in that case, he could only keep going until she believed him, then pulled her into another scorching, profound kiss. Elsewhere, justice was finally served. News broke that the criminal Guofeng had been arrested for hiring someone to commit murder, and the key evidence that brought him down came from Jiang Jinyuan. Sitting in the car watching the news report, a cold, satisfied gleam flickered in Gu Kai's eyes. Beside him, Jiang Lan remarked that her father had always said justice might be delayed, but it would never be absent. Soon after, their manager informed them that because the public uproar was too intense, all of their previously scheduled public appearances had been temporarily canceled, though there was still one banquet they absolutely had to attend. It was an invitation to the birthday banquet of the Gu family's ruling patriarch. At the same time, Tong Meng's grandfather also handed her an identical invitation and asked whether she would be willing to accompany him. The moment she heard that, she panicked, remembering how she had impulsively kissed President Gu that day, and how she had been avoiding him ever since. Her grandfather saw right through her at once, and joked with a smile that she probably wanted to go see that beautiful actress, Jiang Lan. Only then did Tong Meng suddenly realize that Jiang Lan and Gu Kai had only just joined forces to bring down Gu Fei, and that if they appeared now at the Gu family's old residence, the place would definitely turn into a brutal battlefield among the wealthy elite. She secretly swore that no matter what, she would protect her idol. She hurried into the mansion, only to crash straight into a solid chest. Looking up, she froze on the spot. It was actually President Gu, devastatingly handsome. What broke her down even more was that she had somehow left a bright red lipstick mark on his spotless white collar. He lowered his head toward her, a faint smile playing on his lips, and asked whether she had finally finished hiding from him. She stammered that what happened that day did not count at all. But he cut her off directly and calmly told her that he had deliberately asked her grandfather to bring her here so that after the banquet ended, he could have a proper talk with her. His eyes burned as he looked at her and promised that by then he would give her the answer she wanted. Then he leaned down and whispered in her ear that he accepted the little gift she had given him. His calm, assured manner left her completely speechless. All she could do was watch him turn and walk away, the lipstick mark still glaringly visible on his collar, like a trophy. In a quiet, luxurious study, Gu Hualin carried the imposing authority of the family patriarch. The door opened, and his grandson Gu Kai walked in with Jiang Lan, stating the reason for their visit and informing him that the other guests were already waiting in the banquet hall. Gu Kai said that he had decided to come over first to greet him, so as not to disturb his grandfather and grandmother for too long while they reminisced. He stepped forward, wished his grandfather a happy 70th birthday, blessings as vast as the eastern sea and longevity as enduring as the southern mountains, and then presented his gift, a beautifully framed painting. Gu Hualin looked at the family portrait that had never truly existed. In the painting, he stood together with the son and daughter-in-law who should still have been alive. Gu Kai explained that he had asked a painter friend to create what things should have looked like. The old man was clearly moved and admitted that the painting had stirred up many memories. He thanked Gu Kai not only for the gift, but also because he had uncovered the true cause of death of the son he had loved most, resolving the knot that had weighed on his heart for so many years. He gestured for the two of them to sit down and poured 2 glasses of wine as he brought up reconciliation. He told Gu Kai that no matter how long they had been apart, the blood of the Gu family still ran through him, and fallen leaves always return to their roots. He let out a heavy sigh and said that he had long since forgiven Gu Kai's mother, and that the doors of the Gu family would always remain open to him. He even offered to arrange a high-ranking position for Gu Kai in the Gu group, dismissing his art career as nothing more than a youth-driven profession, and promised that he would arrange his marriage to Jiang Lan as well. On one condition, he had to come back and work for the Gu family. The ultimatum, in his words, could not have been more obvious. He pushed a glass of wine toward him. If Gu Kai was willing to acknowledge him as his grandfather, then he should drink it. As long as he accepted, Gu Hualin would formally introduce the two of them to everyone at the banquet afterward. Gu Kai remained silent, outwardly calm, but with undercurrents surging within, while Jiang Lan gently placed her hand over his arm in comfort. The one who broke the silence was Jiang Lan. She first solemnly thanked Grandpa Gu for his kindness, then shifted her tone and gracefully, yet sharply asked in return whether, if she were not the famous actress she was now, he would still be willing to acknowledge her. If she were only a poor doctor, an ordinary working woman, or the owner of a small restaurant, would she still have had the chance to stand before him and call him Grandpa? The question hung in the air, answered only by the old man's cold, hard stare. At last, Gu Kai's voice broke the stalemate, filled with the pain that had built up over many years. He told his grandfather that he truly wished he could have said those same words for his parents back then. Then he picked up the wine glass and said that both he and Jiang Lan would drink this cup. The two of them raised their glasses together, but Gu Kai quickly made it clear that this wine was not a toast to his grandfather, but was being drunk on behalf of his deceased parents. After draining it in one gulp, he gave his final decision. He had no intention of giving up his career, was not used to living in a mansion like this, and had no plans to get married. As this unfilial younger member of the family, he would not be attending tonight's birthday banquet. Gu Hualin's face twisted with rage, and he roared out his grandson's name, accusing him of abandoning the woman he loved. Gu Kai's expression remained icy as he reminded the old man that the first person to abandon him, back in the rain at his parents' funeral, had been his own grandfather. The person who had raised him, loved him, and accompanied him through the darkness had not been him. When he looked at Jiang Lan, his gaze softened. Tightening his grip on her hand, he declared that the only family he had now was the person he was holding in his hand. Outside in the garden, Tong Ming complained to Gu Cheng that she had been looking forward to this banquet so much, yet Jiang Lan had not shown up at all. She admitted that half of it was because she was worried Jiang Lan might be bullied, and the other half was purely because she wanted to eat the grand feast prepared by his private chef. Gu Cheng laughed and patted her on the head, saying that if she liked these dishes, she could come often in the future. Then his expression turned serious as he asked what kind of relationship she wanted to develop with him. She avoided the question and instead asked what he thought of her, and why, after they had kissed, he still wanted to keep getting close to her. He said that she was very interesting, free-spirited, unrestrained, and a little childish. Tong Ming immediately expressed exaggerated dissatisfaction, feeling that those were all flaws. But Gu Cheng explained that she was vivid and bright. He admitted that in that world full of deception, he had long forgotten what it felt like to live without calculation. But when she appeared, appeared, carrying vigorous vitality and warmth. She was like a beam of light. Only then did he realize that he wanted this light, this sweetness, to belong to him alone. He asked whether that reason was enough. Tong Ming froze, then asked again that if she was only a side effect, why had he still chosen to approach her? He answered bluntly that he desired her body, then pulled her straight into his arms. In his embrace, Tong Ming admitted that after meeting his family, she finally understood the oppressive gloom of the Gu family, and also understood why Jiang Lan was unwilling to marry into it. She asked whether dating him would feel like being in prison. Gu Chang suggested that she investigate for herself and gave her a 2-month trial period to see whether she could become official. Then, beneath the starry sky, he bent down and kissed her deeply. Tong Ming thought to herself that when a subordinate offended her superior, she ought to be punished, not rewarded. He took her hand and looked up at the moonlit night sky, suggesting that they stop thinking about the future and simply love each other. Then the scene shifted to a film set 2 years later, with a director called cut on a perfect wedding scene. The film being shot was titled White Truth, adapted from the Gu Han case. The director was Gu Jie, while Jiang Lan and Gu Kai played the male and female leads respectively. In this fictional version, the story was given a happy ending. The heroine saved her husband, and the two stood side by side, fighting the corrupt industry together. In this world, no one had died, and justice always arrived in time. After filming ended, Tong Ming rushed forward to hug Jiang Lan and congratulate her. Gu Kai deliberately asked if she was only congratulating one person. Jiang Lan thanked her friend, then handed her the bridal bouquet she was holding and told her that now it was her turn. Just then, Gu Chung walked over with a knowing smile. Looking at the young actors playing their younger selves, Jiang Lan sighed that the magic of film lay in its ability to create new possibilities and heal old wounds. She felt as if she were watching another version of them in a parallel world, a world where they had grown up in love. Gu Kai asked thoughtfully whether, in that world, their relationship would still be the same as it was now. He gazed at her, his eyes unwavering, and confessed that he had a feeling that no matter which parallel world he was in, he would fall in love with her without hesitation, needing no reason at all. He simply knew that for someone who had known nothing but cold, the hard-won warmth granted by fate was a treasure that had to be held tight and cherished for a lifetime.